Tiffany James was born on August 18, 1980, in Tampa, Florida. She was the only child of Rosalind James and Turner Humphrey. Her parents were never married and separated soon after her birth. Her father moved away, started a new family, and showed little interest in her. Years later, as an adult, Tiffany decided to locate her father. They spoke, and she assured him that she held no grudges and wanted to keep in touch. This reunion allowed Tiffany to meet her half-siblings and their families, leading to the development of strong, positive relationships. Meanwhile, Rosalind focused on her own life and left Tiffany with her grandparents. Although Tiffany had both biological parents, she was primarily raised by her grandparents. Her mother Rosalind visited occasionally but did not play an active role in her upbringing. It was her aunts, Barbara and Vicky, along with her grandmother Beulah, who took on the parenting responsibilities. They ensured Tiffany attended preschool and school, celebrated her achievements, and supported her in every way. She was an outstanding student with a passion for literature and a creative spirit. She dreamed of opening her own beauty salon and becoming the best in her city. Tiffany was a sociable, popular, and stylish person. She often attracted attention with her looks and confidence, making her appealing to young men. While in high school, she started dating a boy named Derek Andrews, who was a year older. They both believed their love would last forever. In her senior year, Tiffany became pregnant and gave birth to their first child, a son named Derek, on July 26, 1998. This changed her plans for college as she dedicated herself to motherhood. Derek took on various odd jobs to support his family, while Tiffany's family helped them as much as they could. In August 2002, 4-year-old Derek became a big brother when his parents welcomed another son, Darian, named after his paternal grandfather. At this point, Tiffany and Derek were living together in a small rented apartment. Although money was tight, they remained hopeful for their future and dreamed of creating a stable life together. A couple of years later, however, their romantic feelings faded, and they decided to separate amicably. The son stayed with Tiffany while Derek supported them and made an effort to spend time with his children. He eventually began a new relationship but remained committed to being an involved father to Darian and Derek. As a single mother with 2 young sons, Tiffany started to seriously consider her future. She wanted a career that would allow her to provide for her family independently. Since she had not pursued further education after high school, she was eager to change that. Tiffany enrolled in a medical college, aiming to become a cosmetic specialist. Her ultimate goal was to open her own practice or even a clinic where she could turn her passion into a successful business. To manage her finances better, she moved back in with her grandparents, as paying for both tuition and rent was too much of a burden. Her family helped care for her sons whenever she was at work or in class. After finishing her education, she got a job at a private clinic as an assistant to a well-known doctor. She had a steady income and began advancing in her career. For a while, it appeared that everything was finally coming together for her. However, she found herself lacking a strong, supportive partner to lean on during difficult times. In early 2007, Tiffany met a man named Daryl Williams. He was 14 years older than she was and had 3 grown children from a previous marriage. Despite their age difference, this did not hinder their romantic relationship. She believed that he was a mature and trustworthy man, genuinely prepared for a serious commitment. Their relationship developed quickly, and soon, Tiffany, at 27, found herself pregnant. This news shocked both of them, but they were excited, and Daryl proposed to Tiffany, who happily accepted. However, during the routine checkup, she learned she was expecting twins. In March 2008, she welcomed twin girls, whom she named Diamond and Denia. This happy event has brought joy to her life, and she has devoted all her love to her family, cherishing every moment spent together. Tiffany enjoyed taking her children to different events, discovering new activities, and creating lasting memories. She also loved dressing her daughters in matching outfits that gave them a fashionable appearance. Her older sons participated in sports like baseball, track, and swimming, while her twins, Diamond and Denia, began dance classes and rhythmic gymnastics at an early age. As the years went by, the children grew, but Tiffany and Daryl never married. Gradually, their relationship began to deteriorate as they found it increasingly difficult to communicate. Tiffany eventually realized that Daryl was not the person she had thought he was. Their relationship ended when she discovered his infidelity. Without any hesitation, she gathered her children and departed. After separating from Daryl, Tiffany relocated with her family to the quiet town of Brandon, Florida. This community was known for its strong infrastructure, low crime rates, and affordable housing, making it an ideal place to raise a family and start over. Eager to create a stable future, Tiffany completed a hairstyling program and landed a job at one of the top salons in town. She quickly built a loyal clientele and gained a reputation for her talent and creativity. Aspiring to open her own salon one day, she began looking for potential rental locations. Her skills, ambition, and rising reputation established her as one of the most in-demand stylists in the area, paving the way for a bright career ahead. As a single mother of 4, she moved into a spacious rental apartment in a newly built residential complex situated in one of the town's finest neighborhoods. Nearby amenities included a school, a dance studio, and a large sports center, everything she needed for a comfortable and fulfilling life for her family. By 2012, her sons had become more independent and often helped care for their younger sisters. Around this time, Tiffany decided to reconnect with her father and half-siblings. She traveled to Alabama to find them, and their family bonds were restored. They began to stay in touch, visit each other for holidays, and their children quickly grew close. Life was falling into place. Her finances were stable, and she was surrounded by loved ones. Although she felt secure about her future, Tiffany, a young, ambitious, and attractive woman, yearned for romance. She still believed in love and hoped to find a man who would love her and embrace her family, a man with whom she could build a strong and happy home. In 2014, Tiffany started her own small business, which began to thrive. That same year, at 34 years old, she reconnected with Ben, a man she had known in her youth but hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Their unexpected encounter at a shopping mall marked the start of something special. Initially, they kept their relationship private. Ben was also a single parent who had recently settled in Brandon with his 2 young children. They began as friends, sharing coffee and meaningful conversations. When Ben finally confessed his feelings for Tiffany, she felt like the happiest woman in the world and admitted she felt the same way. Their relationship grew deeper and both families supported it. Tiffany was ecstatic, savoring this newfound happiness without rushing. She kept their romance discreet, sharing details only with her closest friends and family and refraining from posting pictures of them together on social media. Gradually, she prepared for a significant change as they decided to move in together and create a home as one family. On October 1, 2015, Tiffany posted a romantic and mysterious message on her personal social media account. The post featured a photo of 2 hands clasped together, one male and one female, both adorned with wedding bands, set against the backdrop of a Bible. The caption simply read, "Yes." This suggested that she was engaged, but she chose to keep her fiancé's identity a secret for the time being. Tiffany and her family always put a lot of effort into celebrating Halloween. They planned their costumes ahead of time, carved pumpkins into glowing lanterns, and went out to collect candy from their neighbors. By this time, Darian and Derek were old enough to enjoy the holiday with their friends, while the younger twins, Diamond and Denia, still loved going trick-or-treating with their mom. Since they lived in a large apartment complex, going door-to-door wasn't this thrilling. Instead, they visited a nearby neighborhood filled with single-family homes, where Halloween decorations created a festive atmosphere. Families in costumes moved from house to house, and generous homeowners made sure to have plenty of candy, so no one went home empty-handed. That night was supposed to be fun and relaxing, but no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. A local woman was home alone, preparing to watch a horror movie to get into the Halloween spirit. The streets outside were quiet, most families had already gone home, and she didn't expect any more trick-or-treaters. Around 9 p.m., she was dozing on the couch with the TV still on when suddenly there was a loud noise, like an explosion, that woke her up. At that moment, her front door, which she had forgotten to lock, swung open. Startled, she quickly got up to shut it. What she saw on her doorstep left her frozen. A figure dressed entirely in black, wearing a hockey mask like the ones from the Friday the 13th movies, stood there. Instead of a machete, the person was holding a shotgun. For a split second, it felt like a scene from a movie or an elaborate Halloween joke. In shock and unsure of her next move, she glanced down and saw a woman lying at the figure's feet, writhing in pain and struggling to move. The masked figure looked down at her for a moment before raising the weapon again. Terrified, the woman ran for her life. She slammed the door just as two more deafening gunshots rang out. Collapsing onto the floor, she covered her head with her hands, fearing she might be next. Then, silence. The stillness was broken by a faint tapping on the window. At first, she ignored it, too frightened to move. But when the tapping came again, she cautiously approached the window and, against her better judgment, looked outside. There stood a young girl, tears streaming down her face. Without thinking of her own safety, the woman rushed to the door to help. Outside, she noticed another young girl sitting on the ground, shocked, hugging her knees. Without hesitation, she brought both girls inside, locked the door, and grabbed her phone to call for emergency services. By that time, other neighbors had heard the chaos and called the authorities. When first responders arrived, they discovered a woman lying in a pool of blood on the pavement. Despite her critical injuries, she was still alive. Paramedics did everything they could, but unfortunately, on the way to the hospital, she died from her wounds. The victim had no identification, and the two young girls were too traumatized to speak. However, as more neighbors gathered, they quickly recognized the woman, Tiffany, who is the owner of a local hair salon, along with her twin daughters, Diamond and Denaya. Authorities immediately contacted Tiffany's relatives, while Diamond and Denaya were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, neither child had suffered any physical injuries, but they were deeply traumatized. Mental health professionals were brought in to help them process the event. Many people had been out celebrating that night, and several witnesses recalled the horrifying scene. However, piecing together the full story was challenging, as many struggled to believe what they had seen. It all felt too surreal, almost like a staged performance. Meanwhile, the masked attacker slipped into the crowd of costumed revelers and disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing a silver Chevrolet sedan parked near the house shortly before the incident. Witnesses noted that the car sped off after the first loud noise but stopped a short distance away moments later. It was uncertain whether the driver fled in a panic or had a connection to the attack. Unfortunately, no one saw the license plate, and no one could identify the driver's gender. Adding to the difficulty, there were no security cameras in the area to capture the incident. Witnesses could not provide even a basic description of the suspect, who was fully covered in a costume, hood, hockey mask, and gloves. They only agreed that the attacker was slightly taller than average and had a muscular build. At the crime scene, Tiffany's handbag was found on the ground, with its strap torn and its contents strewn about. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong, but this theory was quickly dismissed. The cash inside the purse was untouched, and Tiffany was still wearing several pieces of gold jewelry. Nothing had been stolen. Moreover, it seemed unlikely that such a violent act would occur over a simple mugging, especially with a shotgun involved. The aggression of the attack suggested that it was personal. But who would want to harm Tiffany, a cherished mother and respected community member? Investigators began by questioning her ex-partners and her current boyfriend. Tiffany had been separated from her former partners, Derek Andrews and Daryl Williams, for years, and any previous conflicts had long since dissipated. Her current partner, Ben, remained a mystery since Tiffany had kept their relationship private, revealing little to friends and family. Due to this secrecy, detectives felt it necessary to question him urgently. Officers arrived at Ben's house around 5 a.m. the next morning. Despite the early hour, all the lights in the house were on, and Ben was found sitting by the front door with a shotgun. The officers ordered him to drop the weapon and raise his hands, which he complied with, insisting he was not involved in the attack. He then pleaded with the officers to protect his children, explaining that he had learned about the crime just hours earlier and was fearful that the attacker might come after him next. He felt a strong need to protect his family. During the questioning, Ben shared that in the months prior to the incident, Tiffany had told him about someone she believed was stalking her. She suspected it might be her ex-fiancé, Daryl, who was also the father of her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Their separation had been difficult, and they were currently engaged in a custody battle over the girls. Ben confirmed his whereabouts on Halloween night with a strong alibi. He stated that he, Tiffany, and their children had gone trick-or-treating earlier that evening. Later, he took his children to visit relatives while Tiffany and the twins intended to return to their home briefly before staying the night at his place. However, she never showed up. Almost at midnight, Tiffany's oldest son called to deliver the devastating news. Once investigators verified Ben's alibi, they released him and allowed him to go home. The focus then shifted to Daryl. Was he involved in such a violent act? Detectives were skeptical. Could he really have committed something so horrific in front of his own daughters, leaving them with lifelong trauma? On November 1st, officers visited Daryl's last known address but found that he no longer lived there. Instead, they encountered his adult daughter, who informed them that her father had moved in with his new girlfriend 6 months ago. She was visibly shaken when she heard about Tiffany's tragic death and was clearly in shock. His daughter disclosed concerning information about his short temper and controlling behavior. He was known to be domineering and would become furious when things didn't go his way. Additionally, he had a strong interest in firearms and owned a shotgun. Daryl's daughter explained that her father's breakup with Tiffany had been very contentious. He harbored deep resentment over having to pay child support and had fought hard for full custody of their twins, even though he knew he had little chance of winning. However, she noted that if Tiffany were gone, he would have had a better chance of gaining custody of the girls. Her daughter described her father as ruthless and believed he was capable of committing a crime. After speaking with her, investigators went to Daryl's workplace, a large chemical plant. His supervisor spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated worker who could handle the workload of 2 people and was always willing to take on extra shifts. However, Daryl's aggressive demeanor often led to conflicts with co-workers, sometimes resulting in physical confrontations. Notably, on the night of November 1st, Daryl, for the first time, refused a last-minute shift change, citing personal reasons. This unusual behavior raised further suspicions, as it left him without a confirmed alibi for the night of the crime. Detectives visited the home of Daryl's new girlfriend, Rosalind. They noticed a silver Chevrolet sedan in the driveway that matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. When Rosalind answered the door and saw the officers, she appeared nervous. However, after learning the reason for their visit, she insisted that Daryl had stayed with her all night and had not left the house. Since there was no physical evidence to hold Daryl, the investigators decided to interview the main witnesses, Daryl and Tiffany's daughters, Diamond and Denia. They were still struggling to cope with the trauma. Denia was mostly silent, experienced nightmares, and couldn't sleep without the lights on. Diamond seemed to handle things better but would break down in tears whenever the conversation shifted to that tragic night. To help them, a skilled psychologist was brought in to gently support the sisters through their trauma, and over time, they began to share their experiences. They revealed that while staying with their father, they often saw a mysterious man delivering folders of papers to him. One day, when their father stepped out, they couldn't resist their curiosity and peeked inside the folders, discovering photos of their home, pictures of their mother in various locations around town, and even images of Ben's house. This leads them to realize that their father has employed a private investigator to follow their mother, Tiffany. Even more concerning was the fact that just 2 days before Tiffany's death, she had won full custody of the twins in court, requiring Daryl to pay child support, a situation he strongly opposed. With this new evidence, the police obtained a warrant for Daryl's arrest. Given his known history with firearms and the likelihood that he might resist, the officers decided it would be safer to arrest him at work, where security was tight, minimizing the risk of an armed confrontation. When the officers arrived, Daryl appeared shocked but did not resist arrest. He calmly allowed them to handcuff him and requested to speak with a lawyer. Initially, both he and Rosalind denied any involvement in the crime. However, investigators found phone records and GPS data showing they were both near the crime scene that night. Rosalind was the first to cooperate. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Daryl, stating that she had not known his exact intentions, she had merely driven him to the location and waited in the car. When she heard a loud noise, she panicked and drove off but slowed down to let Daryl jump in before fleeing. She claimed that she later provided him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. Daryl faced charges of first-degree homicide, which could lead to the death penalty. In an attempt to escape this severe punishment, he tried to shift the blame. Upon learning that Rosalind had testified against him, he accused her of having an affair with his adult son and claimed that they had conspired to frame him. He was willing to implicate his own son in a serious crime to save himself. However, investigators quickly disproved his claims by thoroughly examining the evidence and confirming that his son had no involvement in the events of that night. With no alternatives available, Daryl eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. In April 2017, at the age of 49, he was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after at least 25 years. On a lonely road in Morelos, a young woman's body was found. Bystanders quickly called for emergency help. She was lying still, her skin had noticeable bruises. There were no ID or personal belongings nearby to identify her. Ariadna Lopez was born on July 5, 1995, in a challenging neighborhood in Mexico City. Despite having limited resources, she grew up in a loving environment. Her mother raised her and her older brother, Omar Rodriguez. Their father was mostly absent and had little interest in being involved in their lives. In his absence, Omar took on the role of a protector and role model for Ariadna, creating a strong bond that gave her a sense of security knowing she was supported. Ariadna had a warm and friendly personality, which made her well liked by her friends. She easily connected with others and was known for her honesty, helpfulness. During her school years, she formed close friendships, shared dreams about the future. However, her adulthood was marked by tragedy. In 2018, when Ariadna was only 23, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. The illness progressed quickly, and the family soon faced the heart-wrenching loss. The death of her mother affected both Ariadna and Omar deeply. This experience strengthened their relationship, forced Ariadna to grow up quickly, taking charge of her own life. Before her mother's illness, Ariadna started dating a young man, and their relationship progressed quickly. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. The birth of their son was a significant turning point, but it did not bring long-term stability to their relationship. They realized early that they were not compatible as a couple and decided to part ways. However, they continued to work together to co-parent their son. As a new mother, Ariadna faced various challenges. She had to juggle parenting with the need to find a stable job. Her journey toward financial independence began when she secured a job at a popular bar in Mexico City that catered to affluent clients. This role came with high expectations regarding professionalism and social skills. At the bar, Ariadna learned to interact effectively with diverse people. Despite the stress of the job, she met its challenges by using her charm and strong work ethic. When the global issue struck, Ariadna's life changed dramatically. The bar where she worked closed, and she lost her job. Instead of feeling defeated, Ariadna viewed this as an opportunity to pursue a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. This new venture represented her determination to shape her own life. With her experience and a strong network of contacts, she successfully established a business that provided financial security for herself and her son. During this time, Ariadna began a new relationship with a man she felt a strong connection with. This relationship brought her happiness and a sense of stability. She balanced her responsibilities between her son, her business, and her new partner. Although her days were busy, she welcomed each moment with appreciation, eager for the new opportunities that came her way. By the age of 27, Ariadna's life was like a carefully arranged puzzle. Every success and challenge added to the overall picture of her journey. She had faced loss, rebuilt her life from scratch, focused on her son's future, and achieved her independence. However, just as this chapter of her life seemed to be starting on a positive note, it was unfortunately a precursor to something much more troubling. Ariadna met Vanessa Flores through mutual friends at a social event where Ariadna was with her friends. Vanessa made a strong impression. She was young, energetic, and charismatic, easily attracting attention with everyone around her. However, those close to Vanessa often noted that she could be unpredictable. Behind her charm, there were some more difficult aspects to her personality, and her actions sometimes surprised others. Rodel Astudillo Garcia, a middle-aged entrepreneur, often appeared in Vanessa's social group. His name was frequently associated with rumors due to his wealth, influence, and extravagant lifestyle. He was often seen with younger women who wanted to join his circle. There were many whispers about him, including tales of high-profile connections and even suggestions of links to organized groups. However, no one in his social circle could confirm any of these claims. Rodel himself steered clear of direct questions regarding his past or business dealings. His presence garnered both respect and a sense of unease. Ariadna was smart and independent, but she didn't realize how different her new friends were from her usual social circle. Vanessa, eager to impress, often boasted about her connections to influential people, particularly Ratel, whom she claimed could solve problems effortlessly. Gradually, Ariadna began spending more time with this group. Vanessa seemed genuinely intrigued by Ariadna, lavishing attention on her and diligently trying to earn her trust. When Rodel learned about Ariadna from Vanessa, he quickly wanted to meet her. During their first encounter, he surprised her with his attentiveness and charm. His confidence attracted people, including Ariadna. However, behind his polished facade lay a more complicated character. Those who had interacted with him mentioned his manipulative nature. Despite this, Ariadna perceived him as respectful and even kind. Vanessa played an important role in building the connection. She often invited Ariadna to events where Rodel was also present, fostering a welcoming atmosphere. However, as time went on, small warning signs began to emerge. Ariadna's close friends started advising her to be wary of this group. Some knew about Ratel's dubious reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable behavior. They were concerned that this new social circle might carry hidden dangers. Ariadna dismissed her friends' concerns about her new social circle, viewing her friendship with Vanessa as a refreshing escape from everyday stress. It offered her a chance to experience new things. Meanwhile, Rodel tried to win her over by being generous and friendly, inviting her to dinners and parties that felt fun. Even though Ariadna was in a relationship, she continued to keep her friendships and go to social events. Those who knew her said her partner trusted her and had no issues with her socializing. As time went on, Ariadna noticed some changes in her relationships. Vanessa began to call her more often, suggesting outings and making plans that focused on spending time together. At the same time, Rodel was gradually trying to become a more significant part of her life, presenting himself as someone who could always provide help or support. Unknowingly, Ariadna was getting deeper into their dynamic. On October 30th, 2022, Ariadna accepted Vanessa's invitation to spend the evening with friends. They planned to start at a popular restaurant in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa assured her it would be a relaxed evening filled with good food and enjoyable conversation. Rodel was also expected to join them, which made Ariadna feel slightly uncomfortable. Although she had her reservations about him, she didn't want to disappoint Vanessa, so she decided to go. The group met in the evening at Fisher's, a seafood restaurant, the venue known for its upscale atmosphere and stylish decor, which was lively. At their table, the mood was relaxed. Wine and cocktails were being enjoyed, platters of appetizers added to the festive feel of the night. Rodel took the spotlight, sharing stories, proposing toasts, and engaging playfully with the wait staff. He exuded confidence and made sure everyone noticed him. Vanessa joined in, lightening the mood with jokes and laughter. The rest of the group attempted to keep the upbeat vibe, but Ariadna stood out because she seemed uncomfortable. She frequently checked her phone, responding to messages and looking concerned as she read the screen. She often glanced at Roddle, as if trying to understand unspoken feelings behind his words. Vanessa tried to draw her back into the fun, urging her to relax and have another drink, but Ariadna remained reserved, her demeanor suggesting that something was troubling her more than the lively atmosphere could hide. In evening, Ariadna shared a puzzling message on her social media: "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" This caused concern among her followers. Some thought it was just a joke, but her close friends and colleagues felt it was out of character for her. The message created an unsettling feeling that, at the time, no one understood would be connected to her last hours. As the night went on, the group decided to continue their evening at Roddle's house, a suggestion made by Roddle himself. Vanessa supported the idea, claiming it would be a more relaxed and private setting. Although Ariadna felt uncertain, she eventually agreed after her friends pressured her. The rest of the group followed along, and they all traveled together to Roddle's home in his vehicle. His house was situated in an upscale neighborhood that reflected his public persona. Inside, the decor was sleek and modern, featuring luxurious elements. Upon arrival, the group settled into a spacious living room where music played and drinks were served, allowing the night to unfold. However, Ariadna started to feel increasingly uneasy. She stepped away several times to check her phone, pretending to take calls, which made her seem distant and distracted. Vanessa noticed her behavior and began whispering to Roddle, which only added to the tension in the room. Near midnight, Ariadna expressed her desire to go home because she was tired. Vanessa encouraged her to stay a bit longer, just another half hour. Roddle said nothing, but his lingering gaze on Ariadna made her uneasy. As the night came to a close, the guests began to depart, and Ariadna was among the last to leave. After that evening, no one in the group would see her alive again. On October 31st, the night before the Day of the Dead, Ricardo Calderon and a friend set off on a bike ride south from Mexico City to Tepoztlan, a popular day trip destination. They turned off the road to rest outside the colonial town. That's where they made a grisly discovery: a woman's body in the bushes beneath an overpass, within earshot of passing traffic. She was lying on her back, with her arms spread out, her beige skirt pulled up above her waist, and her right foot clad in a white high-top sneaker. Her hair was braided, and she had no identification or belongings. They quickly contacted the police, who arrived several hours later. While waiting, they took photos of the scene to document details that might assist in identifying the woman. When the police arrived, they secured the area, started gathering evidence. They found visible tire tracks in the dirt and markings that indicated the body had been moved. Forensic specialists observed signs of a struggle, but they couldn't determine the exact cause of death right away. No weapons were discovered, and the body had no obvious injuries that could explain what happened. There were also no documents or personal items to identify her. Hours later, images of the scene began to spread on social media, causing widespread concern. Among those who saw the photos were friends and family of Ariadna. Her father and her brother, Omar, recognized familiar features, including her tattoos. The tattoo reads, Armida, the name of Ariadna's mother. Another is a sunflower, her signature symbol. They feared the worst, so they filed a missing person report and informed the authorities that the woman found might be Ariadna Lopez. Meanwhile, authorities in the state of Morelos began a separate investigation. However, the local police's initial actions faced significant criticism. They mishandled evidence collection, leaving many crucial details at the scene undocumented. This raised serious concerns about the professionalism and integrity of the involved law enforcement. When Ariadna's family came to identify the body, they faced their worst fears. Omar recognized his sister by a tattoo on her shoulder. The shock was overwhelming, especially upon seeing the state of her body, which bore bruises and trauma on her face and arms, indicating some form of violence. In contrast, the police's initial statements were vague and unconvincing. The family responded by calling for justice, demanding a transparent investigation. On the same day, they contacted friends who used social media to help raise awareness. The campaign quickly gained traction, attracting thousands of users. Despite increasing public pressure, the Morelos police continued to believe that the death could have been an accident. They indicated that a final conclusion could only be reached after the forensic report was finished. This position only fueled further suspicion, especially as rumors started to spread that influential individuals might be attempting to cover up the truth. Investigators first interviewed Rodel and Vanessa, the last known people to see Ariadna alive. Their statements provided the initial account of the situation. Rodel stated that after the party, Ariadna chose to leave his house and called a taxi. He described her as a little upset but not overly concerned. He said he walked her to the door, and she left alone. Vanessa supported his story, confirming that Ariadna took a taxi but did not mention her destination. However, inconsistencies in their account quickly surfaced. The main issue was the absence of any confirmed taxi records. Neither Rodel nor Vanessa could provide the contact information for a driver or any evidence to back up their claims. Later, investigators checked several taxi service logs in the area but found no record of Ariadna being picked up that night. Another concern was the inconsistency in Vanessa's story. Her answers changed depending on the questions asked. At first, she claimed that Ariadna left the party on her own. Later, she mentioned that they had an argument, implying that Ariadna might have been emotionally troubled. Ariadna's friends reported to the police that Vanessa contacted them after Ariadna's disappearance, trying to suggest that Ariadna was in a bad state of mind, referring to her vague social media post. This post, made just hours before Ariadna's disappearance, raised concerns for many. While her family and close friends initially viewed it as a joke, investigators began to think it might signal her emotional distress on the night of the party. Additionally, Vanessa's increasingly anxious behavior was alarming. In messages to Ariadna's friends, she appeared hesitant to discuss the events of that night. At one point, she expressed fear of being suspected, though she didn't explain why. These clues led investigators to believe that Vanessa might be hiding important information. The initial investigation into Ariadna's death did not provide a clear explanation of what happened. However, further inquiries by law enforcement and independent experts revealed important evidence. 2 autopsies, surveillance footage, and text messages from the suspects' phones became crucial in piecing together the events. Oriel Carmona, the state's chief prosecutor, told reporters that an autopsy determined Ariadna Lopez died of severe alcohol poisoning. He stated that investigators found no signs of violence. Sitting at the same table, Yasmin Herrera Soto, the chief medical examiner, clarified the findings. The autopsy showed significant bruising but no fatal injuries. According to the autopsy report, none of the 17 fresh wounds on Ariadna's arms, legs, and torso broke the skin or caused external bleeding, and there were no broken bones or signs of assault. In an interview, Pereira noted that there were a pair of bruises on the back of Ariadna's head that caused internal bleeding in her skull, but no brain damage, and that the bruising was consistent with a fall. The cuts on Lopez's forehead were believed to have been caused by insects attacking her while her body was outside. Prosecutors stated that lab tests showed Ariadna's blood alcohol level was 0.498, a level that is 6 times the legal limit for driving in the United States. According to Carmona, Ariadna choked on her own vomit. Nevertheless, her family strongly disputed this finding. Ariadna's family, unsatisfied with the official explanation, requested an independent second autopsy. Under pressure from the public and her relatives, Ariadna's body was sent to a forensic institute in Mexico City. The results of this second examination contradicted the original conclusions. Experts discovered multiple injuries, including head trauma, bruises, and signs of struggle on her arms and legs, suggesting she may have tried to defend herself. These findings indicated that Ariadna's death was not accidental or solely due to alcohol. Consequently, her death was reclassified as the result of violent actions, leading authorities to treat the case as a criminal matter. Security footage from Rodel's apartment building provided crucial evidence in the case. One video shows Rodel early the morning after the party. A bald, bearded man dragged Ariadna Lopez's body, his legs stiff from rigor mortis, through the hallway and down to the garage. He carried the corpse over his right shoulder to the back of a black SUV, then hurried to the driver's seat. Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum identified the man as Rodel Astudillo and accused him of driving the body and dumping it near Tepoztlan, a charge prosecutors later said was substantiated based on analysis of his cell phone records. Sheinbaum said Astudillo likely chose to dump the body in neighboring Morelos state because of his relationship with Carmona, the prosecutor she accused of covering up the case. Sheinbaum said that they had tried to blame the victim. He added that never again should a woman's murder be covered up and a woman be defamed and harmed. Meanwhile, Vanessa often told Ariadna's friends that she might have been having emotional difficulties and suggested she could have intentionally disappeared. However, her friends described Ariadna as lively and optimistic, with no known emotional issues. When the second autopsy and surveillance footage, it became evident that the initial theories of an accidental death or voluntary departure from Rodel's home were not valid. The evidence instead indicated a violent act and a conscious attempt to conceal the body. These findings led to legal actions against Rodel and Vanessa, who would soon face charges in court. Vanessa was the first to be arrested. Authorities discovered that she had been in regular contact with Rodel after Ariadna's death, discussing ways to evade legal consequences. Her arrest occurred amid significant media attention. During initial questioning, Vanessa claimed she was not involved in Ariadna's death, but her statements contained numerous contradictions. She asserted that she had gone to bed early on the night of the incident and knew nothing about what happened afterward. However, further investigations disproved this claim. Message logs indicated that she was aware of the situation and had conversed with Rodel about important details. Investigators also found that Vanessa had taken actions to destroy potential evidence, including deleting photos and conversations, trying to distance herself from the aftermath. Realizing the overwhelming evidence against him, Rodel chose to turn himself in. He arrived at the police station with his legal team and claimed he was innocent. He stated that he did not harm Ariadna. Instead, he panicked after finding her unresponsive in his home the morning after the party and attempted to conceal her body, fearing he would be blamed. However, investigators found significant issues with his version of events. First, a second autopsy revealed clear signs of physical trauma, contradicting his assertion that she died without any interference. Second, surveillance footage showed him intentionally carrying her body in a way that suggested he was trying to avoid being seen, which is not typical behavior for someone seeking help. Furthermore, his text messages with Vanessa indicated that they had coordinated their stories and worked to mislead others about what actually happened. During the investigation, alarming new evidence came to light pointing to possible corruption. There were increasing suspicions about a link between Rodel and a prosecutor in Morelos. Notably, the initial autopsy report from that state failed to mention any injuries that suggested violence. Public activists and Ariadna's family accused the prosecutor of abusing their position to protect Rodel, leading to widespread public anger. In response, authorities in Mexico City began a formal review of the prosecutor's actions, while Internal Affairs launched an independent investigation into potential misconduct. Some witnesses alleged that Rodel had ties to criminal groups, which could explain his seeming assurance that he would escape punishment. Nevertheless, both Vanessa and Rodel denied any direct involvement, instead choosing to defend each other, deflect questions. This evasiveness heightened investigators' suspicions and played a significant role in the decision to keep them in temporary custody. The reasons and events of that night prompted a thorough investigation. To find the truth, investigators had to piece together the timeline, analyze physical evidence, and study the actions of everyone at the gathering. Gradually, a clearer understanding started to take shape. Ariadna Lopez arrived at Fisher's, a bustling seafood restaurant in Mexico City, at around 6 p.m. on October 30th, wearing a long beige dress and white high-top sneakers. She hugged both Vanessa and Rodel. The trio, along with 3 others, left the restaurant about an hour later in Rodel's black SUV. All 6 arrived at Rodel's building at around 7:15 p.m. They took the elevator to his apartment. At first glance, everything seemed typical. There was laughter, conversation, and music, but subtle hints indicated something was off. Witnesses and text message analysis showed that Ariadna was unusually quiet and distracted. She often checked her phone, sending messages and answering calls, behavior her friends noted was unlike her during social events. This detail became important in the investigation. Ariadna's messages to a friend revealed her worries about the gathering and discomfort with certain people there. Although Vanessa and Rotel were the hosts, there was noticeable tension between them. Witnesses later noted that Vanessa directed several sharp comments at Ariadna throughout the night. Ariadna, wishing to avoid drama, responded calmly and tried to defuse any potential conflict. As the night progressed and alcohol began to affect everyone, tensions intensified. Vanessa, already emotional, raised her voice multiple times, accusing Ariadna of being disrespectful and unfriendly. No one else at the gathering agreed with these accusations, but the atmosphere became increasingly tense. While Rotel tried to stay neutral, it was evident that he felt uncomfortable with Vanessa's actions. The turning point occurred the next morning. Witnesses reported seeing Ariadna heading toward the exit, apparently trying to leave the house, but for unknown reasons, she returned shortly after. It is thought that Vanessa confronted her again at that time, escalating their argument. Investigators believe jealousy was at the heart of their conflict, as Vanessa accused Ariadna of attracting too much attention from Rotel. Messages found on phones showed that Vanessa and Rotel later discussed the tense moments from that night. Within about half an hour, 3 of the 6 had left, leaving only Rotel, Vanessa, and Ariadna inside. The case file indicates that Vanessa, influenced by alcohol, became increasingly aggressive. At some point, investigators think an altercation took place, resulting in the fatal injuries Ariadna sustained. Why did Ariadna share such an unusual message on social media that night? Initially, many assumed it was a joke, but her close friends later confirmed that she was likely feeling uneasy because of Vanessa's behavior and the tense vibe at the gathering. The post might have been her way of expressing her discomfort or reaching out for help. As pieced together the events, it became clear that Vanessa's jealousy, heightened by alcohol and her emotional instability, significantly contributed to what transpired. Instead of seeking assistance, Rotel appeared to prioritize hiding what happened, which ultimately made the situation worse. Ariadna's family has worked hard to reveal the full truth about her death. They organized protests, created social media campaigns, and made sure the public remained focused on the case. One major success was attracting international media attention, which increased pressure on Mexico's judicial system to be transparent. In late November, hundreds of people participated in a protest march in Mexico City. The preliminary court proceedings in Ariadna's case were a key moment in their quest for justice. Despite facing some resistance from authorities, her family and their legal team ensured that the case was handled openly and fairly, with all details thoroughly examined. The public and the media closely followed every step of the investigation and court process, minimizing the chances for cover-ups or misinformation. The legal process centered on the actions of Rotel and Vanessa. During the hearings, prosecutors presented strong evidence, including surveillance videos, audio recordings, and text messages from their phones. This evidence suggested not only that they helped hide Ariadna's body but also that they might have been involved in aggressive behavior leading up to her death. The defense claimed it was all a tragic accident, but the extensive witness testimonies and forensic findings raised significant doubts about that explanation. A key part of the trial was uncovering the motive behind the crime. Witnesses who knew Vanessa described her as emotionally unstable and prone to outbursts, especially when drinking. Rotel was depicted as having a questionable past with possible connections to criminal groups, which further complicated his role that night. Although both defendants denied any responsibility for Ariadna's death, their statements often conflicted with established facts, increasing suspicions against them. At this time, the final verdict has not yet been reached, and the investigation is still ongoing. However, prosecutors have charged the suspects with homicide, which may be categorized as femicide, a crime motivated by gender-based violence. In Mexico, this classification is seen as an aggravating circumstance and could result in a maximum penalty of up to 70 years in prison if both suspects are convicted. In January 2023, after reviewing conflicting autopsy results and other evidence, Mexico's Federal Attorney General's office sided with Mexico City prosecutors. The Attorney General stated that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, resulting from a blunt instrument or contact with a flat, hard surface. The coroner's conclusion that Ariadna's death was related to excessive drinking was deemed unacceptable by the Attorney General. Investigators determined that she died in Roddle's apartment on the evening of October 30th, between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., but they did not provide details regarding a possible motive. Morelos' prosecutor, Carmona, denied any wrongdoing. He described the work of his forensic detectives as impeccable and dismissed the Attorney General's findings as mere opinion. Mexico City authorities increased security for the Lopez family to mitigate fears of retaliation by Roddle's accomplices. Ariadna's 7-year-old son is now living with her older brother, Omar. As the closest male role model, he has assumed the responsibilities of both guardian and father. Omar is fully committed to meeting the child's needs while also honoring his sister's memory by providing the love and stability that Ariadna once offered. The rest of the family has rallied around him, determined to help the boy cope with his loss and ensure that he grows up in a nurturing environment. Ariadna Lopez became a symbol of the fight for equality as women marched in the streets on Women's Day with her image on signs. On the morning of May 17, 2005, a 911 call came from a quiet home in Alexandria, Kentucky. A woman was screaming, claiming that someone had broken in and shot her husband. When the police arrived, they found the house in chaos. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered everywhere, and broken glass covered the floor. In the bedroom, they discovered a man's body. Initially, it appeared to be a botched robbery, but something felt off about the situation. The children provided different accounts of the event, raising suspicion. Then, the police uncovered a crucial piece of evidence hidden deep inside the washing machine that changed the investigation. What truly happened in the Bosley home that morning? Robert Bob Bosley was born on August 6, 1962, in the small town of Alexandria, Kentucky. He grew up in a close-knit, religious family with his siblings. From an early age, Bob demonstrated a sharp intellect and a strong ambition. Although much of his early life is not well documented, it is clear that he started planning his future before he even became an adult. Bob dreamed of becoming wealthy and owning his own business. He began by offering chimney cleaning and minor roof repairs. With long hours, affordable rates, and a strong work ethic, he gained a reputation as a reliable and friendly worker. His hard work paid off. Eventually, Bob expanded his one-man operation into a successful business, Bosley Roofing and Chimney Sweep in Alexandria. Under his management, the company became known for its quality and reliability, attracting loyal customers and generating impressive profits. With a growing influx of money, Bob aimed for even greater success. He started buying rental properties, eventually owned about 20. These investments significantly increased his income, making him one of the most successful businessmen in the area. His newfound wealth allowed him to enjoy a lavish lifestyle, complete with sports cars, horses, an airplane, a large boat, and a collection of expensive firearms. His boat, frequently spotted on Lake Cumberland, became known for hosting wild adult parties filled with alcohol, music, and scantily dressed attendees. Bob met 18-year-old Amy at one of his favorite local restaurants. Amy, also from Alexandria, grew up in a working-class family and faced financial challenges, especially due to her father's struggles with alcohol. Despite these difficulties, she was determined to create a better life for herself. After graduating high school with top honors in 1986, Amy enrolled in business studies at a community college affiliated with Northern Kentucky University. To support her education, she worked as a waitress, where she met Bob. He was older, wealthy, and charming. Initially shy, Amy soon became captivated by his lifestyle. She began attending his infamous lake parties and quickly became a close friend of his. Eventually, Amy won Bob's heart. After 4 years of dating, they got married. This was a major change for Amy, who had transformed from her modest beginnings to marrying one of the most eligible bachelors in the area. They then started a family, welcoming their daughter Morgan in 1996 and their son Trevor 3 years later. Amy transitioned from her carefree party days to fully embrace her new role as a dedicated mother, swapping late nights at the lake for school events and parenting responsibilities. Bob was expanding his business and investments, but he found one aspect particularly frustrating: administration. Managing payroll, taxes, invoices, and contractors felt burdensome to him. He preferred spending time by the lake rather than being stuck in an office. On weekends, he often disappeared on his boat for days at a time, keeping his location a secret. Friends later noted that Bob seemed to be distancing himself from his family, becoming more involved in a life of indulgence, secrecy. Since Amy had a background in business administration, he asked her to take over the company's financial and administrative tasks. Initially, she was hesitant, but she eventually agreed. From that point on, Amy took charge of managing the company's finances, payroll, and tax responsibilities. The Bosleys seemed to be doing exceptionally well, living in a charming log cabin in the woods south of Alexandria while their dream home was being built close by. This future home was impressive, featuring 14 acres, stained glass windows, a stone tower, and Gothic gargoyles. To everyone else, the Bosleys represented the American dream. They were good-looking, successful, generous with their time, actively involved in their church and their children's school. Bob was known for donating services to low-income families, earning respect throughout the community. However, beneath this fairy tale facade lay a troubling reality. As the administrator, Amy had access to the company's complete financial situation. While Bob focused on expanding the business, the lake, and building their dream home, Amy secretly started redirecting company funds. Instead of paying taxes, she funneled the money into a personal account that was hidden from view. For years, this embezzlement went unnoticed, but the IRS eventually caught on. They sent multiple letters, made phone calls, and tried to schedule meetings, but Bob never received any of these communications. Amy had ensured that all IRS correspondence was sent to a private mailbox she controlled, fully aware that the government was closing in but thinking she could delay things indefinitely. On the morning of Tuesday, May 17, 2005, just days before their 15th wedding anniversary, everything changed. Around 5 a.m., Amy Bosley made a frantic 911 call. Her panicked voice filled the line until the call was abruptly interrupted by a loud crash. The dispatchers attempted to reconnect. Shortly after, law enforcement rushed to the Bosley cabin. When they arrived, they found Amy in shock, holding her children. Her sister soon arrived to take care of the kids while Amy was taken in for questioning. Police secured the area and contacted the crime scene unit. As daylight broke, more officers arrived to search the nearby forest with K-9 units and a helicopter, looking for what they suspected was a fleeing intruder. In the bedroom, they found Bob's lifeless body. He was kneeling beside the bed, leaning forward, and had multiple gunshot wounds. However, only 2 shell casings were found in the room, which added to the confusion. As detectives examined the evidence, they started to doubt the authenticity of the crime scene and the entire narrative surrounding it. Except for the children's rooms, the rest of the house was chaotic. Kitchen cabinets were left wide open, including those under the sink, which seemed odd for a thief to rummage through. A rear door had a broken window, indicating a potential entry point, but surprisingly, most of the broken glass was outside rather than inside. This inconsistency raised suspicions from the beginning. The disorder continued elsewhere in the house. In the bathroom, the mirrored cabinet was open, and prescription bottles were strewn across the floor. It appeared more like a staged mess than the result of a rushed intruder. According to Amy's 911 call, the alleged attacker had left quickly, so why was there such a mess? As crime scene investigators examined the house, detectives began interviewing Amy Bosley at the police station. She seemed shaken and at times distressed, but appeared confused, as if she was having trouble remembering the details of her story. Amy described the intruder as a white male with a nasal voice, bad breath, and a strong odor of urine. She claimed he burst in during the night. He attacked both her and Bob. She had 2 marks on her chest, which she said were from the assault. When detectives asked who might have wanted to harm Bob, Amy indicated that he wasn't very popular, suggesting he had a wild reputation that could have led to enemies among disgruntled employees. She specifically mentioned a contractor and longtime friend of Bob as someone with whom Bob had recently had a disagreement. However, the friend was quickly ruled out as a suspect. He had a solid alibi and was very upset about Bob's death. Panic spread throughout the Alexandria community as schools were closed for several days due to the fear of a killer at large. Residents struggled to accept that Bob, a kind and generous man known for his willingness to help others, had been brutally murdered in his own home. Meanwhile, detectives at the cabin searched for clues. They found only 2 shell casings near Bob's body, despite multiple gunshot wounds, prompting them to look in the basement. There, in the family's washing machine, they discovered wet clothing and, at the bottom, a folded cloth with 4 additional shell casings. It was puzzling. Why would a fleeing killer hide evidence in a washing machine inside the victim's home? Even more unusual was an aluminum baseball bat found nearby, showing fresh scratches and white residue. Further lab analysis would be necessary to understand its potential relevance. Amy has been released and can now reunite with her children, but new details are emerging. The crime scene looks suspiciously arranged. Valuables, including large amounts of cash, were left alone. Amy's emotional reaction seems insincere. She showed no tears or genuine sorrow. Investigators believe there may be hidden motives. Then, a significant development occurred. IRS staff visited the station after learning about Bob's death. They had been trying to reach him for months regarding an enormous unpaid tax bill of over $1.7 million. A meeting was set for the day Bob died. The IRS agents also revealed an odd detail. During a previous call, they had spoken to someone who claimed to be Bob, but the voice sounded strange, high-pitched and unnatural. They suspected it was a woman pretending to be a man, and that voice may have belonged to Amy. The motive is now clear. Amy, who was responsible for managing the company's finances, had embezzled millions of dollars by redirecting tax payments into her personal account. Bob, completely unaware of her actions, he will learn the truth as soon as the IRS is ready to confront him. To make matters worse, there were allegations of Bob's infidelities. His sister later told investigators that she overheard Amy say she would shoot Bob if he ever cheated on her or left her. At the time, it seemed like a joke, but it now felt like a serious threat. Despite the growing evidence against her, Amy Bosley continues to deny any involvement in her husband's murder. During her second interrogation, she insists that she loved Bob, even though their marriage had its issues. She acknowledges that they faced problems, as many couples do, but argues there was no reason for her to harm the father of her children. Investigators, however, have a different perspective. Ballistics tests confirm that all 6 bullets that hit Bob correspond to 6 casings found, 2 in the bedroom and 4 concealed in the washing machine. A crucial development in the investigation occurred when Morgan and Trevor Bosley, ages 9 and 6, were interviewed separately. Both children provided the same description of the events. They had gone to bed peacefully but were suddenly awakened by the sound of 6 gunshots, followed by the sound of glass breaking. In contrast, Amy reported that the glass broke first and then the shots rang out, indicating inconsistencies in her story. Additionally, the scratches on her chest, which she claimed were from a struggle with the intruder, raised suspicions. The marks were too symmetrical, resembling staged wounds rather than genuine defensive injuries. A closer look at her blouse revealed that it hadn't been torn during the supposed attack. Instead, it had been carefully cut with scissors and then ripped to make it look damaged. Less than 2 weeks after Bob was murdered, authorities arrested Amy Bosley and charged her with the crime. However, there was one critical piece of evidence still missing: the murder weapon. Eventually, the weapon was found, but the circumstances of its discovery are unclear. One account states that a pistol from Bob's gun collection was discovered hidden in Amy's handbag, behind a wardrobe. Another version suggests that the weapon was found later by Amy's sister, who had taken care of Amy's children and belongings that night. While going through Amy's purse, she allegedly found the gun and promptly informed a lawyer, who then turned it over to the police. Regardless of how it was obtained, ballistic testing confirmed that the gun matched the 6 shell casings found at the crime scene and in the laundry. Although the bullets recovered from Bob's body were too damaged to establish a direct match, the circumstantial evidence against Amy was substantial. As the trial opened, prosecutors presented a straightforward and damaging story. For years, Amy had secretly embezzled money from Bob's company by diverting tax payments to herself. She had managed to evade the IRS through mail redirection and deceit, but her luck had finally run out. On May 17, 2005, Bob was set to meet with IRS agents who were insisting on explanations. Amy understood what this meeting signified: being exposed, facing divorce, and possible prison time. In response, the once respected wife, mother, and community volunteer came up with a desperate plan. The night before her meeting with the IRS, Amy, with her children asleep nearby, quietly took one of Bob's guns. Some sources claim she sedated the children first. While Bob was asleep, she shot him. Although wounded, he woke up and tried to defend himself. Investigators noted the way he was injured suggested he lunged at her, unaware that she was the one holding the gun. In shock and bleeding, Bob was unable to overpower her. She attacked him again. By the end of the incident, Bob Bosley, who had built his wealth from nothing, and who had put his trust in Amy, was dead in the home they were planning to share. Amy, who once supported him, now faced charges for orchestrating his murder, not out of fear, but out of greed. Bob Bosley's carefully built life of luxury and respect crumbled in one night due to cold calculations. What was left was a broken family, a shocked community, and an unforgettable legacy of betrayal. She smashed the back glass door with a baseball bat, rifled through cabinets and drawers to create the illusion of a burglary. Next, she concealed 4 spent bullet casings wrapped in cloth at the bottom of the washing machine. To make her injuries look real, Amy lightly cut her chest with what appeared to be scissors and slashed her blouse to suggest a struggle. Finally, she concluded her act with a 911 call, her voice filled with panic and the scene meticulously staged. Forensic evidence presented a different perspective on the case. Laboratory tests showed that glass fragments found on the aluminum bat matched the pieces from the broken rear door. The bat, which Amy's children recognized as belonging to their family, had not been used by an intruder. Instead, it was used by Amy herself. The police found no footprints, vehicle tracks, or any signs of anyone fitting the description Amy gave. No one had entered or left the house that night. Investigators also uncovered details about the Bosleys' marriage. Amy believed Bob had cheated on her. Photos discovered in their safe, taken during wild parties at Lake Cumberland, revealed a secret lifestyle and confirmed at least one affair. While the emotional pain of betrayal was evident, the real motive ran much deeper. Amy had embezzled the large amount of money from Bob's company by skimming off funds and failing to pay taxes. She thought that by killing him, she could keep her secret safe. Without Bob, his assets could cover the debt, allowing her to keep the remaining funds. The defense argued that the bullet casings could have come from Bob's pockets after a trip to the shooting range, but the evidence against Amy continued to mount. Despite this, her lawyer pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses, no DNA evidence, and no clear connection between the bullet casings and the bullets found in Bob's body. This ambiguity provided a chance to influence the jury's decision. Fearing that Amy might be acquitted and wanting to protect the Bosley children from the trauma of testifying against their mother, the prosecutors offered a plea deal. This would allow Amy to avoid a trial, spare her children the emotional strain, and receive a lighter sentence. In return, she would admit her guilt without revealing what had happened to the stolen millions. On November 2, 2006, Amy Bosley appeared in a Campbell County courtroom wearing a green and white prison jumpsuit. Her expression was impossible to read. Before the sentencing took place, Bob's family spoke directly to her. His brother accused her of being a liar and a fraud, warning her that although she might gain her freedom one day, she would never escape the memories of her actions. He reminded her that every night, she would see Bob's face and remember the tears of his children who were left without a father. Bob's sister fixed her gaze on Amy and asked the haunting question that troubled them all: did he beg you to stop? The answer would never be known. Next, Bob's mother approached, heartbroken and shaking, as she read a letter expressing her grief for the final goodbye that never happened. Amy remained silent, looking down and wiping away her tears. The judge acknowledged the damage Amy had caused, not just to her husband, but also to her children, her community, and her own future. He sentenced her to 20 years in prison. According to Kentucky law, she would be eligible for parole after serving 85% of her sentence, which equated to 17 years in prison. On May 18, 2022, exactly 17 years after Bob was murdered, Amy Bosley, who was 54 at the time, was released from the Kentucky Correctional Institution for Women. Most news outlets barely covered her release, and her current whereabouts are unknown. Some speculate that she may be trying to find the millions of dollars she had embezzled. Bob is buried at St. Stephen's Cemetery in Campbell County, Kentucky. He is remembered for his kindness, ambition, and dedication to his family, tragically killed by someone he trusted deeply. In retrospect, Amy's choices appear both tragic and irrational. She was not in financial distress, and her husband was not abusive. The IRS may have offered a solution to her financial issues, or if she sought revenge, a divorce could have made her wealthier and free. Instead, she opted for murder. Timothy Wiltsey was born on August 6, 1985. His family called him Timmy. By 1991, when he was 5 years old, he lived with his mother, Michelle Ludzinski, in the small town of South Amboy, New Jersey. On Memorial Day weekend, which also marked the end of the school year, Timothy and Michelle went to a carnival at an amusement park in the nearby town of Sayreville. On May 25, 1991, Michelle's 14-year-old niece, Jennifer Blair Dilcher, and her mother came to visit. However, their plans changed, and they could not go to the carnival together. Michelle and Timothy arrived at the park around 7 p.m. Michelle bought several tickets for the rides, and then they walked over to a soda machine. While she turned away for a few minutes to pay for the drinks, Timothy disappeared. Jennifer was supposed to be picked up by her mother's friend, who was her babysitter. They arrived 15 minutes late and found Michelle frantically looking for her son. As soon as she saw Jennifer and the nanny, Michelle explained that she had been momentarily distracted. Now her son was missing. The group decided to split up and search for him. Jennifer and her nanny quickly found a police officer in the park and asked for assistance. Meanwhile, Michelle spoke to the officer, describing her son Timothy as wearing a tank top, shorts, and sneakers with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on them. She filed a report about Timothy's disappearance, prompting the officer to start searching the park. The celebration was paused, and the area was cordoned off for a thorough investigation. That evening, the search area widened to include nearby forests and beyond. Finding Timothy quickly was proving difficult. Sadly, there were no surveillance cameras in the area at the time. The following day, multiple search teams were sent out. The local authorities provided a helicopter and a team of divers to check 2 nearby ponds. Hundreds of volunteers joined the search and rescue efforts, covering a large area. Many law enforcement officers worked alongside them in the park and its surroundings over the next few days, but they were unable to locate Timothy. During this difficult time, Michelle's family supported her. According to her father and sister, she appeared to be a devastated mother. Michelle never imagined that such a tragedy could happen to her. Just a few weeks earlier, she had bought a graduation dress for her child's kindergarten ceremony. They were getting ready for the celebration and planning a trip to visit Michelle's sister in Florida for the holidays. Everything seemed normal. Despite facing financial challenges, Michelle did not want to rely solely on government assistance. She continued to work and received some support from her family. George Wiltsey, the boy's father, had no relationship with him. Michelle met George after she dropped out of school. She initially lived with her parents on Long Island before choosing to start a family with him. They dated for about 3 years and then moved to New Jersey. While in New Jersey, Michelle became pregnant and gave birth to Timothy in 1985, with George being 18 and Michelle 17 at the time. They decided to expand their family, but eventually moved to George's home state of Iowa. Unfortunately, they struggled to create a stable life together. 6 months after the move, Michelle returned to New Jersey, first living with her sister and her husband. Later, she moved into a rented apartment with Timothy and cut all ties with George. Michelle didn't reveal why she and George broke up, but she prevented him from seeing their son afterward. George didn't provide child support, and Michelle rejected his assistance. She even sent back all the items he mailed for their son. People who knew them suspected that banned substance use might have played a role in their breakup, and George had physically assaulted Michelle at least once. George, however, argued that Michelle longed for New Jersey and her family, which led her to distance herself from him. In the spring of 1991, Michelle, a 23-year-old single mother, was raising her 5-year-old son on her own. She was the only provider for both of them and was determined to create a stable life, which meant she often had to switch jobs. However, her limited education made it difficult to maintain consistent employment. Over time, she worked as a legal assistant, a secretary, and in various retail positions, sometimes juggling 2 jobs at once. Her father helped by sending her money for housing, which was crucial for their survival. Managing everything while caring for a young child was challenging. Michelle frequently needed assistance from family and friends to look after her son while she worked. When no one could help, she would bring him along, which often made her late for work. This tardiness harmed her reputation and led to her being fired from jobs. In January 1990, her support network took a hit when her sister and brother-in-law, who had been a key source of help, moved to Florida. Feeling overwhelmed and without adequate support, Michelle made the difficult decision to send her son to live with her brother in Minnesota for 2 months. This would allow her to save money for his education. Many people who knew Michelle described her as a dedicated mother who devoted all her free time to her son, ensuring he had everything he needed. They often went hiking together and worked on school preparations at home. However, after her son went missing, some critics emerged. They pointed out that her son, Tim, created tension in her romantic relationships. Many of the men she dated were reluctant to take on the responsibility of raising another person's child, which often led to the end of their relationships with her. In her frustration, Michelle started to see her son as a burden. One of her former partners described her as an immature mother who acted more like Timothy's older sister than a parent, saying she often neglected the child's needs. One day, Timothy entered a neighbor's yard and was bitten by the neighbor's dog, requiring 72 stitches on his face. This happened despite the neighbor warning Michelle to supervise her son to keep him off his property. A friend of Timothy's noted that Timothy was very afraid of Michelle's last boyfriend, Fred Bruno. Even though Fred left a negative impression on many, Michelle did not take her son's fears seriously. The friend even speculated that Fred might be involved in Timothy's disappearance. Initially, Timothy's biological father was considered a primary suspect. He had been estranged from Michelle and was prohibited from contacting his son, which gave him a potential motive for kidnapping Tim. Authorities thoroughly searched the father's home but found no evidence of Tim. He passed a polygraph test and had a strong alibi. Fred Bruno was also investigated but was quickly ruled out as a suspect. When the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, became involved in the search for Tim, they began to question Michelle Ludzinski's true identity. Her behavior appeared odd. She did not seem genuinely worried about her son's disappearance. Michelle was experiencing financial issues and difficulties. For many young single mothers, this ongoing stress can sometimes lead to thoughts of abandoning their child, whom they may view as a major source of their problems. Some mothers choose to place their children with relatives, some give up their parental rights, and tragically, some even harm their children. As a result, Michelle quickly became a primary suspect in the case of her son's disappearance or potential murder. Authorities were eager to find out what she had done to him. Just days after Timothy went missing, she took a lie detector test but failed. A week later, she took another test and failed again. The expert who conducted the tests noted that Michelle showed significant emotional fluctuations, avoided eye contact, and seemed more focused on her own situation than on her child's well-being. Several clear signs of deception were observed, and investigators later found out that Michelle had lied to her close friends, claiming she had passed the lie detector test. The situation attracted a lot of public attention. Family members and neighbors also noticed that Michelle didn't express much emotion or seem to grieve for her missing child. During a press conference where she announced her son's disappearance and asked for help, many people felt she seemed too calm, speaking in a flat tone that resembled reading from a script. This observation increased suspicion. Although her relatives insisted she was deeply affected and just kept her emotions in check because of her personality, the inconsistencies in her behavior raised concerns. Michelle's account of her child's disappearance was inconsistent and raised suspicions. In the month after Timothy went missing, she kept adding more details to her story during each interaction with the police. Her narrative changed drastically. What initially seemed like a case of carelessness transformed into a kidnapping involving different attackers, first 2 men, then a man and a woman. This left law enforcement officials uncertain about the truth. Michelle believed her son was being held captive. She based this belief on a call from an anonymous individual who claimed that Timothy would be returned within a month if she remained calm. This is why she seemed so self-assured. Although this information couldn't be verified, it raised questions about why she would fabricate such a story. Her odd behavior prompted detectives to investigate her more closely. Given the time that had passed since Timothy's disappearance, they suspected he might not be found alive. Investigators checked if Michelle had received any large money transfers related to a potential sale of her son, but found no significant transactions, and her financial situation had not changed. They searched her home and car, initially suspecting that she might have harmed her son, but found no blood evidence. They went further and used luminol to detect any hidden blood stains, but again found nothing. However, Michelle's history of dishonesty led detectives and even her friends to doubt her credibility. One friend agreed to have her card tapped to try to extract a confession, but this attempt failed. Over the next 11 months, no damaging recordings or admissions were made, yet Michelle continued to offer inconsistent accounts of events. 3 extensive interviews were conducted, but aside from providing conflicting information, she did not give any new leads. Michelle struggled to understand why the detectives were so focused on her and remained convinced that her son was alive and would come back. In October 1991, an important discovery was made. A school teacher walking in the industrial area near the Raritan River found a sneaker that had a picture of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on it. It was known that Timothy loved these characters. A passerby, who had seen news reports about Timothy's disappearance, remembered that just before he went missing, Michelle had bought him similar shoes. Believing there might be a connection, the passerby contacted law enforcement for further investigation. When the sneaker was first shown to Michelle, she denied it was the same shoe she had bought for her son and listed several identifying features. However, she later hesitated and suggested that the shoe could possibly belong to Tim. This change in her story raised suspicion. The police continued their investigation and found that Michelle had previously worked at the industrial complex close to where a sneaker were discovered, coinciding with the time when Timothy went missing. Notably, she had not mentioned this to the detectives. Colleagues reported that her behavior changed after Timothy's disappearance. She frequently took walks by the stream bank, her workplace, during lunch breaks without providing any explanation. After the first sneaker was found, concerning rumors began to spread, which led FBI agents to investigate the area more thoroughly. During a search along the stream bank, investigators found a skull and 10 other bones in and around a truck tire that had been dredged from the bottom of Red Root Creek. These were located near pieces of the boy's clothing, a pillowcase, a Ninja Turtles balloon, and a blue and white blanket that were buried in an embankment 6.1 meters from the creek bed where the bones were discovered. Law enforcement agencies received these remains on April 23, 1992. Strikingly, Michelle showed no emotional response when informed about this discovery. Fibers and hair taken from the blanket were analyzed, but they did not match Michelle's hair, Timothy's, or anyone from her family. The child's body was also examined closely, and dental records confirmed that the skull belonged to Tim. However, due to the missing skeletal bones and the complete decomposition of soft tissue, the medical examiner could not determine the cause of the child's death. By this time, Michelle had begun a new chapter in her life, moving to a neighboring state as if nothing had happened. At that point, there was no evidence linking her to the alleged murder, and the investigation went cold. However, more strange events involving her were yet to unfold. In January 1994, Michelle found herself back in the news. She made national headlines by sharing a terrifying story about how two federal agents kidnapped her outside her home. They threatened her with a gun, forced her into a car, and drove her to Detroit, where they eventually let her go. She managed to find her way back home on her own. Michelle reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, reporting that two men had called her multiple times, threatening her while pretending to be agents. They insisted that she cooperate and confess to Timothy's murder. Despite their pressure, Michelle maintained her innocence, which she claimed resulted in her kidnapping. Her story captured national attention, shocking the public. Opinions were sharply divided. Some people were furious and called for the authorities to stop harassing her, while others supported the agents' unorthodox methods to extract a confession from a woman they suspected of killing her son. When she returned from Detroit, a note appeared on her door that read, "It's not over." It was thought that she had placed this note herself to support her fabricated kidnapping narrative. Michelle admitted to faking her own kidnapping by taking a bus to Detroit but refused to discuss her conflicting accounts of Timmy's disappearance any further. In March 1995, she was sentenced to 6 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation for the FBI hoax. The Sayreville police believed she staged the kidnapping to avoid being implicated in an investigation of her boyfriend, a police officer from neighboring Union County, who had been accused of improperly checking the license plates of cars that Michelle claimed were following her. In May, the police department decided not to take any action against him in relation to the charges. In 1997, while pregnant with her second child, Michelle pleaded guilty to stealing a computer from a former employer to give to her police officer boyfriend as a Christmas present. Upon receiving the computer, he realized it had been stolen and reported it. She was subsequently sentenced to house arrest for 4 months and was also placed on probation for an additional 3 years. Meanwhile, Timothy's case remained unsolved and had reached a dead end, with even FBI agents unable to make progress. The technology available in the 1990s did not permit a detailed analysis of the evidence needed to obtain physical proof against Timothy's biological mother. Shortly after her sentence was handed down in 1998, Michelle moved to Florida, and in 1999, she relocated to Apple Valley, Minnesota, a suburb of Minneapolis, where she married in 2001 and started a new family. Timothy was not forgotten. In the early 2010s, the case file and evidence were still stored as they were, and the district attorney's office did little more than follow up on occasional tips. After a tip around the 20th anniversary of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, which had nothing to do with the case, Scott Crocco, an investigator with the office, decided it was time to revisit the investigation and see if there was anything that could help solve the case. He focused on the blanket. Investigators reasoned that the boy would not have carried a large blanket through the carnival on the humid 90 degrees Fahrenheit day he went missing. They concluded that the blanket had been taken from Ladzinski's South Amboy home to cover the boy after he died, even though she denied ever having owned such a blanket. Detectives believe that the blanket should have been recognized by people who had interacted with Michelle before her child's murder and then reconnected with her relatives and friends afterward. Several witnesses, including former co-workers, reported seeing Michelle using the blanket. In the early 2000s, Michelle lived in Minnesota with her new husband and their son. After their marriage ended in 2003, Michelle moved to Florida while pregnant with her third child. In Florida, she gave birth, purchased a home, settled in with her 2 children, and worked as a paralegal at a law firm. She kept photos of her firstborn son, who had passed away, to honor his memory and ensured her children knew he had existed. The investigation into his death is ongoing. Crocco interviewed Jennifer Blair Dilcher, the niece who met Michelle at the carnival shortly after Michelle said she couldn't find her son. In the years that followed, Jennifer, who had initially supported her aunt, married and had 2 children of her own, but also became addicted to banned substance. She went to Florida for rehab, leaving the children with Michelle during that time. While Jennifer was in the program, Michelle and Jennifer's mother decided that Jennifer's condition was serious enough that they could not return the children after she completed the program, so they placed them with Jennifer's mother-in-law, whom Jennifer greatly disliked. It took Jennifer some time to regain custody of the children, and she considered Michelle's decision a betrayal. At Krakow's behest, Jennifer began contacting her aunt on Facebook about the case, hoping that Michelle might confess or make some incriminating statement. After being unsuccessful, Krakow showed Jennifer blankets, pillowcases, and a red jacket. She immediately told him that the blanket had been in Michelle's apartment and that Timothy had wrapped himself in it during her babysitting sessions. Two other women who helped care for Timothy also recognized the blanket. This evidence established a crucial connection. It became evident that the blanket couldn't have been mistakenly left near the body, suggesting that Michelle had intentionally brought it to the industrial complex, thinking the body would remain undiscovered there. On August 6, 2014, what would have been Timmy's 29th birthday, following a sealed grand jury indictment, Michelle Lodzinski was arrested in Florida and charged with his son's murder. Prosecutors believed they had sufficient evidence to secure a conviction for first-degree murder. The hearings drew a crowd of concerned individuals, and opinions were mixed. The trial was difficult and stretched from March to May 2016. The only new evidence presented was the testimony of several witnesses stating that the blanket found near the boy belonged to his mother. Jennifer testified at her aunt's trial, claiming she saw the blanket in Michelle's home and believed in Michelle's guilt. However, several witnesses said they had never seen the blanket in Michelle's home, and there were no photographs showing it with her and the boy. Fibers and hairs taken from the blanket were re-examined, providing more detailed analyses than the microscopic tests done in 1991. Unfortunately, these results showed that none of the hairs belonged to Michelle or Tim. Additionally, the prosecution pointed to Michelle's strange behavior. Her inconsistent statements and her calmness when discussing Timothy seemed to suggest her involvement. However, the defense attorney effectively argued that this evidence was insufficient to label the defendant a murderer. The location where the remains were found was only a few hundred meters from the building where Michelle Lodzinski worked at that time. It was an inconspicuous area that almost no one visited. Michelle was aware of this and may have deliberately chosen this place to hide the body. The prosecutor was convinced that there was too much circumstantial evidence, all of which pointed to the boy's mother. However, Michelle's lawyer argued that from May 25, 1991 to April 1992, when the body was discovered, several major storms had occurred. Independent experts confirmed that the Red Root stream, near which the skull and belongings were found, had overflowed its banks. It was located not far from the amusement park where Timothy disappeared, so the water could have carried evidence to that location. This was indirectly supported by the fact that many fragments of the boy's skeleton were never found. The prosecutor's approach had evolved since the investigation in the 1990s. They argued that Timothy had never gone to the amusement park. He had actually been missing long before then. A new theory was presented to the jury. Michelle had gone to the park alone after disposing of her son and had asked relatives to pretend an abduction had occurred. Meanwhile, Michelle's testimony kept changing. The defense attorney provided an explanation for Michelle's unusual behavior. An independent psychiatric evaluation revealed that she has antisocial personality disorder, which may have contributed to her confusing and inconsistent stories. The lawyer noted that the disorder became particularly evident in 1991, right after her son went missing. This was used to explain her strange actions, which were seen as responses to extreme stress and trauma. The evaluation confirmed the diagnosis, with evidence suggesting troubling behaviors. Consequently, the lawyer argued that Michelle's dishonest claims, including her stories about kidnapping, were a result of her illness. At trial, the prosecution argued that Michelle had murdered her son. They claimed that due to giving birth at a very young age, she faced ongoing financial and emotional challenges. Timothy had grown up during a particularly tough time in Michelle's life. Timothy did not have a relationship with his father, George. Michelle kept George from having contact with him and consistently turned down any offers of assistance. With no support system, she struggled to improve her circumstances, and her relationships with men were unsuccessful, which further complicated her situation. The Lodzinski family was divided during the hearings. Michelle's father and sister believed she was a good mother, while her brother and niece, Jennifer, suggested she may have been involved in Timothy's death. Michelle's defense also presented testimony from an Arizona man who claimed that a former inmate from Georgia had confessed to him that he had abused and killed a young boy somewhere near Atlanta. The testimony did not provide any evidence that the man was in the Sayreville area at the time of Timothy Wiltsey's disappearance, and the man himself denied this on the stand. Prosecutors further questioned the Arizona man's credibility by pointing out that he had previously accused another man of assaulting and abusing him. Another witness testified for the defense about a possible third party, a resident of an apartment complex near the festival, who saw several men throw something about 4 feet long, wrapped in white cloth, into the trunk of a car before driving away quickly without turning on the headlights. After hearing testimony from 68 witnesses, the jury began deliberating in May. The next day, a week before the 25th anniversary of Timothy's disappearance, the jury returned a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. Sentencing was scheduled for August 2016 but was postponed as Michelle's attorneys appealed the judge's earlier rulings regarding jury misconduct and insufficient evidence. Shortly thereafter, the defense moved for a judgment of default, requesting the judge to vacate the conviction and acquit her on the grounds that the evidence was insufficient for a reasonable jury to convict. The judge denied this motion, and in January 2017, he sentenced Michelle Ludzinski to 30 years in state prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, the jury told reporters that their opinions were mixed. Not all of them believed she was guilty. They were particularly influenced by the unusual testimony from Michelle, which implied that she was hiding something. However, they questioned why she would do that if she were innocent. Immediately after, Michelle's defense team approached the case with renewed determination. They aimed to have her acquitted, emphasizing that there was no physical evidence linking her to Timothy's death. Extensive checks and tests were conducted, but there were no traces of the boy's blood or any indication that Michelle had harmed him or concealed his body. After their appeal was denied, the lawyer escalated the case to the Supreme Court, highlighting the uncertainty surrounding Timothy's cause of death. He proposed that Timothy might have simply run away from the park and died from natural causes, insisting that no one had killed him. Additionally, he pointed out that several legal standards required for a murder charge and conviction had not been met. The Chief Justice recused himself from the case, and with the remaining justices unable to reach a consensus, the guilty verdict was upheld. The defense attorney, undeterred, after the 2016 conviction, Michelle's defense team appealed, escalating the case to the New Jersey Supreme Court, where Chief Justice Stuart Rabner recused himself. On December 28, 2021, the court vacated the conviction by a 4-3 decision, citing insufficient evidence to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. Michelle Ludzinski was released from Edna Mahan Correctional Facility that day, having served over 7 years. Double jeopardy prevented a retrial. She reunited with her family in Florida, where she had previously relocated. Despite the legal outcome, her brother and others, including George Wiltsey, continued to suspect her involvement, though no new evidence has emerged to reopen the case. After her release, Michelle's brother, who had testified against her during the trial, stated that the jury was correct in convicting her of murder. He argued that the lawyer did not rectify a significant wrong, but instead took away justice for little Tim. However, under state law, Michelle cannot be tried again for this case, even if new evidence arises in the future. The boy's biological father, George, still suspects that Michelle was involved in their son's death. He questions whether she committed the act herself or if she knows who did. Many of Michelle's family members also believe she is guilty, citing her strange behavior, inconsistent statements during interrogations, and the FBI's mishandling of the kidnapping. They are puzzled by why Michelle focused her time and energy on these issues instead of seeking the truth about her son's case. Although Timothy Wiltsey's murder remains officially unsolved, many believe that his mother evaded responsibility. This story unfolds in Canada and caught public attention due to its unusual developments. Nicole Porciello, also known as Nicole Hasselman, was a 34-year-old whose kindness and patience shone through her work in student support services at Templeton Secondary School in Vancouver. She was more than just a helper, she was a true mentor to students navigating the challenges of adolescence. At Templeton, Nicole specialized in supporting students with learning disabilities, crafting individualized plans that boosted their confidence and academic success. Her ability to listen without judgment made her a trusted figure, often staying late to help with homework or offer advice on personal struggles. The school was not just a workplace for Nicole, it felt like a second family, fostering genuine connections and support. Her colleagues viewed her as an inspiration, always approachable and willing to help, whether it was covering a shift or organizing school events. She was cherished not only for her professional skills but also for the warmth she brought to her interactions, often bringing homemade treats to staff meetings to brighten their day. Beyond Templeton, Nicole was deeply rooted in her East Vancouver community, volunteering at local food drives and coaching her son's soccer team on weekends. Her love for gardening transformed her small backyard into a vibrant oasis, where she taught her son about nurturing life and patience. She enjoyed quiet evenings reading novels or watching classic films, often sharing her insights with friends over coffee. These small moments defined her, a woman who found joy in connection and growth, always striving to make those around her feel valued. Outside of work, Nicole was a dedicated mother to her 10-year-old son, Ethan, whose sensitive and kind nature mirrored her own. Nicole successfully balanced her career with motherhood, pouring her heart and effort into both. She aimed to be a positive role model for Ethan, showing him the importance of kindness and how to make the world a better place. Their evenings were filled with rituals, cooking simple meals together, playing board games, or reading bedtime stories. She taught Ethan to stand up for others, drawing from her own experiences helping students navigate bullying. Her friends marveled at her ability to juggle demanding workdays with unwavering attention to Ethan's needs, from attending his hockey games to helping with school projects. Nicole's home was a sanctuary of love. On November 16, 2018, a tragic event changed the lives of Nicole's family and friends forever. Burnaby police reported a crash involving a 2017 charcoal gray Kia Sorento SUV at around 10 p.m. on Barnett Highway, a busy stretch illuminated by streetlights. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. The car was severely damaged from hitting a lamppost, its front crumpled and windshield shattered. A man was trapped inside the vehicle, and time was critical, every second counted. Rescuers quickly cordoned off the area. They worked closely with police and medical teams, understanding that any delay could result in tragedy. A nearby driver, stopped at a traffic light, later told police he heard a deafening crash and saw the SUV swerve violently before impact, sparking immediate concern. Firefighters used hydraulic tools, known as the jaws of life, to pry open the mangled driver's side door, their movements precise under pressure. The man in the car remained seated as paramedics surrounded him, preparing to provide medical assistance as soon as rescuers freed him from the wreckage. After several intense minutes, the rescue commander signaled that it was safe to pull the victim out. The man was carefully removed from the damaged car and handed over to the medics, who noted his dazed expression and minor cuts. The emergency services worked efficiently, with each team member fulfilling a crucial role. Medics quickly began administering first aid, checking the man's condition thoroughly, pulse steady, breathing normal. Once they confirmed his condition was stable, they transferred him onto a stretcher and took him to the ambulance, where they started preparing for transport to Royal Columbian Hospital. The victim's name was Jan Popel, a 41-year-old real estate agent known in Vancouver's competitive housing market. At the hospital, doctors immediately conducted a complete examination and diagnostic tests, including CT scans, to identify any hidden injuries. They documented a few bruises on his arms and a mild concussion, but thankfully, no serious injuries were found. Jan's condition was stable, and his life was not in danger. Nurses monitored his vitals closely, noting his calm demeanor despite the crash's severity. After receiving the necessary medical care, he was kept under observation for 24 hours to ensure his full recovery. Police officers stationed nearby began questioning him as soon as he was cleared, sensing inconsistencies in his initial account of a mechanical failure causing the crash. Jan Popel had built a successful career selling properties in Vancouver's booming real estate scene, known for his charm and persistence in closing deals. Born in Burnaby, He grew up in a middle-class family and showed early ambition, earning a business degree before entering real estate. Colleagues described him as driven but private, often deflecting personal questions with humor. His professional life thrived, but his personal struggles simmered beneath the surface, particularly in his relationship with Nicole. They met in 2011 at a community fundraiser, where Jan's easygoing confidence caught Nicole's attention. Their early days were filled with shared dreams, weekend hikes in the North Shore Mountains, late-night talks about starting a family, and plans to buy a home together. Jan's attentiveness, like surprising Nicole with flowers after a long workday, made her feel cherished. However, his insecurities emerged within a year, triggered by Nicole's growing independence and social circle at Templeton. Jan's romantic relationship with Nicole started off very well, filled with romance, deep affection, and mutual understanding. They envisioned a future together, made plans, and exchanged thoughts. However, over time, Jan began to show traits that concerned Nicole. What began as a caring desire to protect her gradually morphed into obsessive behavior. He claimed to be shielding her from negative outside influences, which led him to isolate her from friends and family. By 2013, Jan's need for control intensified, particularly after Nicole received a promotion at Templeton, boosting her confidence. He began questioning her late work hours, accusing her of prioritizing students over him. His actions escalated to checking her cell phone and social media accounts, demanding passwords to prove her loyalty. His jealousy was extreme, and he struggled to hide his aggression, often raising his voice during arguments over trivial matters like a colleague's text. At a 2015 family gathering, he shoved Nicole during a heated dispute over her talking to a male friend, leaving her shaken but hesitant to leave him. Nicole's sister, Lisa, later recalled warning her about Jan's temper, but Nicole believed his apologies and promises to change. Nicole and Jan's relationship lasted 7 years, marked by growing pain and fear. Specific incidents painted a troubling picture. In 2016, Jan threw Nicole's phone against a wall after seeing a friendly message from a coworker, shattering the screen. In 2017, he followed her to a school event, confronting her in the parking lot and accusing her of infidelity, an outburst witnessed by a colleague. Despite this, Nicole clung to Jan's sweet promises that things would improve, often citing his tearful apologies and vows to seek counseling. He vowed to find the strength to become the loving and trustworthy partner he once was, but these promises prevented Nicole from ending the relationship, even though she felt deep down that Jan's behavior might never change. Friends urged her to leave, but Nicole's compassion and hope kept her tethered, fearing Jan's reaction to a final breakup. They had broken up multiple times, but Jan always pleaded for another chance, and Nicole would relent, believing Ethan deserved a stable family. Their most recent breakup, which she believed would be permanent, happened on November 7, 2018, after Nicole confided in a friend about connecting with another man, seeking a healthier future. Jan was unwilling to accept the breakup. He didn't want to lose Nicole. Overwhelmed by jealousy, he parked his car in front of her house and shared compromising photos of her on social media, a humiliating act that left Nicole devastated. After Jan was removed from the car, the police started their investigation, led by the Integrated Homicide Investigation Team, a specialized unit for complex cases in British Columbia. They interviewed eyewitnesses, including a jogger who saw the SUV speeding erratically before the crash, and examined the accident scene in detail, collecting debris and tire marks to reconstruct the sequence of events. Their questions were designed to uncover the real causes of the crash, suspecting it was no accident. Meanwhile, firefighters finished their tasks and began to pack up their equipment before returning to the station. However, one officer, sweeping the perimeter with a flashlight, made a startling discovery. About 30 feet away from the car, in a muddy ditch obscured by bushes, lay a woman who was unconscious but still breathing. It was Nicole. Her clothes were torn, and blood soaked her jacket, alarming rescuers who immediately called for a second ambulance. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, noting weak vitals and severe trauma. She was rushed to Royal Columbian Hospital, where the medical team performed emergency surgery to address massive internal bleeding. At the hospital, Nicole's condition was critical from the moment she arrived. Doctors identified multiple stab wounds, some penetrating vital organs, and worked tirelessly to save her. Her family, notified by police, gathered in the waiting room, clinging to hope as updates grew bleaker. Carmine, her brother, paced anxiously, while her father, Joe, sat in stunned silence, grappling with the suddenness of the crisis. The medical team's efforts, including blood transfusions and surgical interventions, were ultimately unable to save her life, and Nicole was pronounced dead at 3:17 a.m. on November 17, 2018. Her death sent shockwaves through the hospital staff, many of whom knew her from community events, and left her family in a state of profound disbelief. A few days later, police released a statement. Nicole died from injuries sustained in an SUV crash in Burnaby last week, but authorities discovered evidence suggesting foul play. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team took charge, coordinating with forensic experts to analyze the scene. An autopsy was performed on Nicole's body at a forensic laboratory shortly after her death. An experienced medical examiner, familiar with such cases, carefully examined and documented the numerous injuries on her body. He found a total of 47 stab wounds, some deep and inflicted with significant force, penetrating her chest and abdomen, while others appeared more superficial, suggesting she had struggled to defend herself. The examination revealed that the wounds were made by two different knives, one a serrated kitchen knife, the other a smaller paring knife, indicating a prolonged and frenzied attack. Blood spatter analysis suggested the stabbing occurred inside the vehicle before the crash. The examiner understood that his findings would be crucial in helping law enforcement identify the perpetrator and bring them to justice, providing a clear link to Jan Popel's presence in the SUV. After the autopsy, forensic teams worked tirelessly, analyzing fingerprints, DNA, and the knives recovered from the vehicle. The official report compiled all expert findings, including toxicology results showing no substances in Nicole's system, ruling out intoxication as a factor. This report was not just a document, it became a crucial element in the murder investigation, providing investigators with essential information to move forward. It hit detectives cross-referenced phone records, revealing Jan's threatening texts to Nicole days before the murder, and secured surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showing the SUV's erratic path. Interviews with Nicole's friends confirmed Jan's abusive history, including a coworker who witnessed his 2017 outburst, bolstering the case. In the wake of Nicole's death, her family, friends, and colleagues were overwhelmed with deep sorrow that hit them unexpectedly and intensely. It was incredibly difficult for her family to accept that they would never again hug their beloved mother, daughter, and sister, hear her voice, or create new memories together. Joe Porciello, Nicole's father, withdrew into grief, haunted by memories of her infectious smile. Lisa, her sister, struggled to explain the loss to Ethan, who asked daily when his mother would return. Nicole's friends, who had shared her most heartfelt dreams and experiences, felt they had lost a true companion. They remembered how hard she had worked to rebuild her life, start anew, and pursue her happiness, particularly after years of enduring Jan's control. At Templeton, teachers and students created a memorial garden in Nicole's honor, planting her favorite sunflowers as a tribute to her nurturing spirit. The school's principal issued a statement praising Nicole's dedication, noting how she transformed lives with her empathy. The holidays were particularly difficult for Nicole's family. Her brother, Carmine Porciello, felt he would never fully accept that his little sister was gone. During family dinners, "It's impossible not to notice her empty seat," he said, indicating where she would have sat, her absence a palpable void. Ethan, now living with his grandparents, withdrew from hockey, struggling to process his mother's absence. Community members rallied around the family, organizing vigils and fundraisers to support Ethan's future, a testament to Nicole's widespread influence. On November 29, 2018, Jan Popel was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in connection with Nicole Porciello's death. A hit confirmed the incident was isolated, involving known parties, posing no threat to public safety. Detectives worked hard to gather and secure all evidence, including Jan's blood-stained jacket and the video he recorded, which became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Reconstructing the timeline of events was vital to the investigation. A HIT's analysis of surveillance footage, phone records, and text messages clarified Nicole's whereabouts and Jan's actions. A chilling text from Jan on November 15 read, "You'll regret leaving me," contradicting his claim of an amicable split. This organization of details revealed inconsistencies in Jan's statements, such as his assertion that the crash was accidental, and allowed investigators to assess his premeditated intent. As previously noted, Nicole and Jan's relationship spanned several years, marked by a pattern of breakups and reconciliations. 9 days before her death, Nicole told Jan their relationship was over, confiding in a friend about her hope for a new start with another man, which amplified Jan's jealousy immensely. On the evening of November 16th, Jan picked up Nicole in a rental car while Ethan was at hockey practice. They got into an argument, during which Jan pulled out 2 kitchen knives and stabbed Nicole repeatedly in the passenger seat. Instead of calling for help, Jan took off his bloody jacket, used his phone to record a video, and tried to capture the moment in a misguided attempt to document her suffering. In the video, Nicole could be heard gasping, "He loves she," but Jan showed no remorse, saying, "She brought this on herself." He claimed he stabbed her because he couldn't accept her moving on. After the attack, Jan drove home, leaving Nicole bleeding in the car while he went inside to send emails, including one resigning from his job. For 2 hours, as Nicole clung to life, Jan paid bills and shopped online for a TV and dishwasher, actions later described by prosecutors as callously indifferent. When he returned to the rental car, finding Nicole still alive, he allegedly decided to stage a crash to mask the murder. When Jan accelerated rapidly and crashed into a streetlight, Nicole, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was ejected from the vehicle, landing in the ditch where she was found. The deliberate high-speed impact, confirmed by skid marks, supported a HIT's theory of premeditation. As a result of the gathered evidence, Jan faced charges of second-degree murder. The legal process began with a preliminary hearing in 2019, but Jan's guilty plea on December 15, 2020, expedited proceedings, avoiding a full trial. Sentencing hearings, held in March and April 2021, were a difficult time for Nicole's family and friends, who filled the Vancouver courtroom seeking closure. During the sentencing, a video recorded by Jan after stabbing Nicole was shown to the court. The judge, Justice Kathleen Kerr, cautioned that it contained graphic content and urged anyone who might feel uncomfortable to exit. The 1-minute video depicted Nicole, severely injured and struggling to breathe, while Jan accused her of disrespecting him. "You just took from me and disrespected me for months and years," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. Nicole's father, Joe, visibly upset, left the courtroom, unable to bear the footage. As the video played, Jan sat with his head down in the prisoner's dock. Carmine yelled, "Look at the video. Raise your head," prompting Justice Kerr to call a 15-minute break to ease tensions. After the video, 4 victim impact statements were shared. Joe described Nicole as a beautiful soul and the foundation of their family, saying, "He has destroyed our family. We cannot forgive him for what he has done." Carmine expressed that the crime left him feeling like a zombie, filled with anger and rage. Ethan, through a written statement read by a counselor, shared that his mother was his best friend and that he felt a part of his heart was lost. Nicole's friend, Sarah, spoke of her infectious positivity, urging the court to honor her memory with justice. Justice Kerr characterized Jan's actions as heartless, cruel, and self-centered, but noted his guilty plea as a sign of limited remorse. Joe disagreed, telling reporters Jan seemed unfazed, like he was on a lunch break. Jan Popel pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, which carries an automatic life sentence. The Crown sought 15 years before parole eligibility, citing the crime's brutality and Jan's abusive history, while his attorney argued for 10 years, emphasizing his plea. Neither option comforted Nicole's family, particularly her cousin, Gina Iuliano, who believed first-degree murder charges, with a minimum 25 years, were warranted given the premeditation. In the week before sentencing, Nicole's friends and family launched a social media campaign, Justice for Nicole, to highlight her death's impact and demand stricter domestic violence laws. Posts shared her story, photos from school events, and calls for systemic change, gaining thousands of supporters. In a statement to the court, Jan expressed regret, claiming he never meant for this to happen. On April 13, 2021, Justice Kerr sentenced him to life in prison with parole eligibility after 15 years, balancing the crime's severity with his plea. Nicole's family felt the sentence was too lenient, telling reporters outside the courthouse that Canada's justice system failed victims of domestic violence. Gina vowed to advocate for tougher laws, joining local groups to raise awareness. Nicole Porciello's vibrant life, marked by her unwavering kindness and dedication as a mother and mentor, was brutally ended on November 16, 2018, by Jan Popel's jealousy-fueled violence. While Popel's life sentence with 15 years until parole brought some justice, Nicole's family deems it insufficient, their pain deepened by her absence at family dinners. Her legacy endures through the love she instilled in her son and the students she guided at Templeton Secondary School, where her warmth remains a guiding light. The family's social media campaign and outspoken grief have sparked calls for stronger protections against domestic violence, ensuring Nicole's memory fuels a fight for justice. Though her loss leaves an unfillable void, Nicole's spirit inspires a commitment to a safer, kinder world. The will to live is not something everyone possesses. While some people remain stuck in their problems, a little girl in desperate need of help is fighting against a dangerous psychopath. But what can a child do against someone who has taken many lives? In December 1999, Crystal Searles was just 10 years old. She was known to be hardworking and humble. Despite her youth, she had already faced significant hardships. Unfortunately, what lay ahead for her was worse than anything she had ever experienced. Crystal and her brother were staying with friends of the Harris family in Del Rio, Texas, while waiting for their mother and younger sisters to move from Kansas. December 30, 1999, seemed like a normal day filled with preparations for the new year. But for some, the arrival of the new millennium was about to take a tragic turn. Mark was Crystal's brother, and they both grew up in Kansas. At that time, Mark was 7 years old and Crystal was 10. They spent the day with the children of the Harris family. Crystal and Mark were welcomed by the Harris family for a while. Crystal quickly adapted by helping with household chores and forming close bonds with everyone. During the New Year holidays, Crystal looked forward to reuniting with her mother and sisters. However, she and Mark struggled to get along, likely due to their age difference and varying interests. The Harris family had several children, with Sean as the eldest, followed by Justin, Lori, and Katie. Sean had already moved out but was planning to return for the holidays. That night, the Harris family planned to go into town to pick up Sean and the two older kids. The result is that Crystal, Katie, and Mark would be left alone at home without any adults around. The house was situated in a remote area, surrounded by nature, with few neighbors nearby. That night, little Mark was scared of the dark, wanted to sleep in the same room as the older girls, Crystal and Katie. However, they pushed him away because they wanted to share a secret. Upset, Mark had to go to the next room. It took him 2 hours to calm down and fall asleep. The next morning, sunlight poured into the room, waking Mark up. The curtains had been pulled back. When he opened his eyes, a strange woman was there. She handed him some clothes, urged him to get ready to leave. When Mark stepped out, he was shocked to find a large pool of blood on the floor, with stains and splatters on the walls and door. The floor was almost completely covered in it. People around him were crying and panicking, but Mark couldn't understand what was going on. He looked for his sister but couldn't find her or Katie. The adults ignored his questions about the girls. When detectives arrived at the house, they were immediately struck by the amount of blood present. In the room where the girls had spent the night, they found 13-year-old Katie lying on the floor, unresponsive. It was clear from her severe injuries that she had fought for her life but had ultimately succumbed to a fatal cut to her throat, resulting in blood loss. In contrast, Crystal was fortunate to have survived the attack by an unknown assailant, although she was in critical condition. At around 6 a.m. on December 31, 1999, Pam Searles, Crystal's mother, received a call. They asked for her permission to perform an emergency operation because her daughter was in critical condition with a severe throat injury. Pam was in shock and struggled to understand what had happened. Crystal quickly became an important witness for the police, even as she battled for her life in a local hospital's operating room. After a successful surgery, she was placed on life support, including a ventilator, as she was unable to breathe independently. When her mother arrived at the hospital, Crystal's condition had improved. The surgeon had managed to save her life, but her trachea and vocal cords had sustained serious injuries. Despite her state, Crystal's main concern was whether her friend Katie had survived. However, Pam did not have the strength to tell her that her friend had died. As soon as Crystal woke up after the surgery, she wanted to speak to the police to tell them what had happened. According to Crystal, she and her friend had gone to bed quite late. She had no idea what time it was when she was awakened by a scream. Raising her head from the top bunk, she saw a man with disheveled hair, a thick beard, and dark, angry eyes standing in front of her. She immediately noticed that Katie was bleeding and that this stranger had a knife in his hand. He covered Katie's mouth with his hand, slowly cutting her throat. The attacker hadn't noticed Crystal at first and was about to leave, but when Katie fell to the floor and began to make death rattles, Crystal recoiled involuntarily when their eyes met. Turning around one last time, the criminal spotted Crystal on the top bunk. Terrified, she tried to climb down to escape through the open window. With a quick movement, he caught up with her and cut her throat as well. Then the stranger disappeared from the house. Despite her injury, Crystal was able to crawl. She climbed down from the top bunk with difficulty and headed for the bedroom door. On the way, she bumped into her friend, who was still making hoarse sounds, and then went quiet. Crystal lay down next to Katie, hugged her, and wanted to tell her that everything would be fine, but she couldn't. In that moment, she realized that she was mute. The criminal had severed her vocal cords. She was unable to utter a single word clearly. Suddenly, Crystal realized that she needed to ask for help. The phone was useless in her case, so she wrote a note asking for help and decided to get to the neighbors. With her throat cut, Crystal crawled out onto the terrace of the house, dressed in her pajamas and without shoes, but she saw a light in the distance, realized that it was her goal. Crystal stood up with difficulty and walked slowly toward the light. When she reached the neighboring house, which was a good distance away, she began to pound on the door. Then she heard a man's voice asking who was there. Unable to speak, she continued to knock as hard as she could until he opened the door. The neighbor saw the bloody girl, read the note, and called the police. Crystal's brother was unharmed because he had been in another room where the attacker had not entered. Based on the words of Crystal, a composite sketch was created. A check of the police database revealed several potential suspects with various convictions. The next day, the police returned to Crystal and presented several photographs for identification. Crystal confidently pointed to the image of Tommy Lynn Sells, who immediately became the prime suspect. At that time, he was in Del Rio, having arrived relatively recently. Up until that point, he had committed only minor offenses, but Crystal recognized that empty, cruel look instantly. The detectives decided to investigate him. When Tommy's door was knocked on early in the morning, he was informed that he was under arrest for murder. He came out to meet the police and immediately stated that he was glad he was finally caught because he was tired of committing these acts. Initially, the police did not grasp the alarming significance of Tommy's words. He told them about the murder weapon, which turned out to be a 30-centimeter butcher knife. He had used it often over the years, and the blade had been sharpened regularly. It had simply broken. The man had thrown the knife in the bushes near his home, where it was found with traces of blood. Tommy was taken to the county sheriff's office. From the beginning, he willingly cooperated with the authorities, confessed without hesitation to the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. He was surprised when he learned about the surviving girl. Tommy agreed to reconstruct the events in the house where he had killed Katie. His behavior seemed odd considering the terrible crimes being discussed. At the same time, he was clearly sealing his own fate by cooperating with the authorities. Tommy began to recount the details of the night of the crime. He explained that as soon as he approached the house, he noticed the open window, which made it easier for him to enter. He walked down the hallway, saw different children sleeping in various rooms, and then chose one with a bunk bed. He entered quietly, approached the lower bunk. Tommy began stabbing and cut Katie's throat. Before leaving, he noticed the second girl and also cut her throat. The detectives managed to find out he had been friends with the Harris family for a long time. It was suspected that, based on this relationship, he had planned the attack on Katie in advance, likely intending to abuse her. Tommy did indeed abuse Katie first, then killed her because he was thirsty for blood. Before arriving at the Harris house, he had intended to break into a trailer where 6 people lived. He knew them and wanted to kill them all, but he feared they might fight back, so he changed his mind at the last moment, sought easier prey. He had heard that the Harris family was hosting a couple of children and that they might be alone that night. Crystal's mother felt guilty for not being there for her daughter during such a terrible time in her life, but she had been forced to settle various issues before moving. To better understand what had happened, she expressed a desire to visit the crime scene. Upon arriving, she witnessed a scene that resembled a horror movie, with an entire floor covered in blood. Crystal had run for help with her last strength, leaving bloody handprints on the wall. Immediately after his arrest, Tommy behaved quite calmly. He was being transported to prison when he shocked the law enforcement officers by suggesting that they probably wanted to know about all the other murders he had committed. This surprised all the police officers, especially since they hadn't even asked him about other possible crimes before. Detectives usually avoid allowing journalists to be present during interrogations, as this could lead to important information being widely publicized and having unpredictable consequences. However, this time, the situation was serious. There were numerous murders involved. Ultimately, the decision was made to allow the media to participate in the interviews, which would quickly spread Tommy's story across the country, potentially help find people who had also survived his attacks and could identify their assailant. A reliable journalist, trusted by the police, was chosen for this purpose and was able to convey Tommy's story clearly, without distortion. The journalist sat in the interrogation room for hours, listening to Tommy recount stories of his life, describing his journeys from state to state while killing men, women, and children without remorse. He was a cold-blooded madman, recounting real bloody scenes as if they were made-up campfire horror stories. Among the most vivid childhood memories that Tommy shared was his father's phrase, "Dead men don't talk." From the start, he doubted that any of his victims could have survived the attack. In his opinion, Crystal was very lucky, but it was unlikely that anyone else had been so fortunate. Even at this stage, the extent of his madness was unclear. Over the next 9 months, he communicated regularly with detectives in the presence of a journalist. In total, he described 22 murders that he committed with his own hands. There were other unconfirmed incidents that could not be verified. Clearly, many more crimes had been committed. This man's words were corroborated by his knife, which he had used all these years to take the lives of innocents. The blade had been sharpened so many times that it became very thin and resembled a slate. The butcher knife didn't even look like a kitchen tool, it resembled something from a torture chamber. After all these events, surgeries, discharge, talking to detectives and journalists, Crystal was gradually recovering. She was shocked by the extent of her injuries. A long scar remained on her throat after the surgery, and she cried when she saw it for the first time. Her mother took her to Kansas, away from the scene of the massacre, but they still had to return to Texas for her to testify against the serial killer. 9 months had passed since the murder and attempted murder. Tommy's stories about other crimes had ended. Crystal was 11 years old by this point. She managed to partially recover, but only physically. Psychologically, she continued to struggle with the consequences of the horrors she had witnessed, as well as the cruelty of the madman she now had to testify against in court. She was the main witness for the prosecution. From the very beginning, the situation was tense. Crystal had not seen the criminal since the night he slit her friend's throat before her eyes, almost killing her. It was hard for everyone caught up in Tommy's villainy. During the hearings in Texas, Crystal was taken in by Texas Ranger Johnny Allen, who was a family man with 2 children at the time. Crystal met their daughters, hoping that this would help distract her from her situation. According to the family, Crystal would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, thrashing around in bed as if trying to escape from someone. Everyone knew this was what her nightmares were about, but the girl was determined not to give up. Tommy's lawyer also had a difficult task ahead of him. He knew all too well that his client was a dangerous serial criminal who had taken dozens of lives for no reason. His only strategy was to try to avoid capital punishment. He was not going to deny the charges. Despite the adults' concerns, Crystal even spoke enthusiastically about the upcoming meeting with Tommy. She understood that now he would not have a chance to attack her, so she was not afraid. She simply wanted to achieve a fair punishment for this monster. Crystal comforted herself with the thought that she was the reason he was caught and that she had stopped the chain of murders at his hands. According to the prosecutor's office, if Crystal had not miraculously survived that attack and pointed out Tommy, he would have continued his bloody spree across the United States. Who knows how many more people could have died from his knife? The courageous schoolgirl thought that by doing this, she was pursuing justice and vengeance for her friend who had been killed. Up until the day of her testimony, Crystal felt very inspired. That morning, she woke up to find her mother so worried that she was in tears. She asked her mother to calm down so that she wouldn't be distracted from this important moment that could help them stop the serial killer. During the hearings, Crystal once again demonstrated her fortitude. She walked to the stand when called to testify, passing mere centimeters away from the criminal. Although she could have chosen to enter through a specially prepared secret door for such cases, she expressed a desire to walk past the assailant who had cut her throat. She stated that she was not afraid of the man. At one point, however, her determination wavered slightly. While Crystal was on the stand, Tommy displayed no panic, nervousness, or tears. He didn't even look at her while she spoke and answered questions. Crystal confirmed that it was this man who had slit her and her friends' throats, pointing at him. Conversely, he appeared to be impatiently waiting for a decision, which made Crystal increasingly nervous. Eventually, the tension overwhelmed her. She burst into tears and could no longer speak. The court took a forced 15-minute break to allow the prosecution's main witness to compose herself. After the break, Crystal returned to her previous resolve, showing the jury her scar across her throat, a mark that the defendant had left on her body for the rest of her life. Then there was a demonstration of the attack. Crystal lay on a makeshift table that was meant to represent a bed, showing how the attacker had stabbed her with a knife. This allowed the jury to comprehend the scale of the cruelty and horror that the child had endured. The girl illustrated how she had tried to cover her throat with her hands, having witnessed what Tommy had done to her friend, not wanting to share the same fate. Perhaps this instinct is what saved her from a fatal hemorrhage that could have killed her within minutes. The courage of the 11-year-old schoolgirl was acknowledged by her lawyer. Instead of cross-examining her, the defense attorney praised her and did not ask a single question. At that moment, it became clear that even a serial killer's defense attorney was on the side of the victims. No one expected the trial to be so short, especially in such a high-profile case. However, the jury returned with a verdict after about an hour of deliberation. They found the defendant guilty of first-degree murder and attempted first-degree murder. Now only one question remained: would he receive life in prison or the death penalty? The final stage of the trial was set. No one suspected that the brave little girl sitting in front of everyone actually harbored other secrets. Mark Searles, Crystal's father, believed he understood why his daughter had such a strong, determined character, which enabled her to confront this monster. He was convinced that she simply knew what to do. According to Mark, he and Pam began using illegal substances 5 years before these tragic events. He claimed that the addiction quickly took over subjecting them to a tumultuous cycle of attempting to recover and then falling back into addiction. They began to quarrel more frequently, and things spiraled out of control. Mark got into serious legal trouble, which only worsened over time. Meanwhile, Pam desperately sought to restore her normal life, distance herself from anything related to illegal activities. Ultimately, she filed for divorce, focused on overcoming her addiction. Pam got herself together and concentrated on her children. However, years earlier, Crystal had assumed the role of caretaker, as she was the eldest girl in the family. She recalled a time when her parents were dependent, how her father could sleep all day without regaining consciousness. As a result, she was forced to care for her younger siblings. Naturally, she also attended school. Despite her young age, the schoolgirl began to grasp the harsh realities of life. She became a reliable support for her mother, changed her sisters' diapers, fed them, put them to bed, prepared for school in the mornings, and even cooked her own meals. By her own admission, Crystal felt like the unluckiest girl in her class, as others did not face such struggles. Crystal was never driven to or picked up from school, nor did she receive help. Of course, this situation seemed unjust. On the other hand, would she have been able to ask for help if not for the independence forced upon her in her early years? According to her sisters, during that time, Crystal took on the responsibilities of both her mother and father, with many not even knowing what her parents looked like because she shouldered almost all of the family responsibilities. Crystal remembered the moment her mother, Pam, decided to end it all. Pam managed to quit and gradually return to a normal life. However, from her recollections, her father remained entrenched in criminal circles. He could not quit, and many believed he didn't even try. By Mark's own admission, he couldn't stop using and selling banned substance, finding himself drawn into criminal schemes, fearing that leaving that lifestyle would be a dangerous decision. After Pam and the children moved out, Mark was arrested a few months later. Pam felt relieved to have left him, as staying with him might have jeopardized her dreams of a new life. He ended up in jail because of his criminal connections. His daughters was so angry with him that she simply stopped answering his calls, blaming him for choosing illegal substances over family. Mark he learned about the attack on his daughter. At that moment, he was behind bars and could not help her in any way. At the time of the attack, Mark was serving a sentence for the sale and possession of illegal substances. He was in prison for about 3 months. Suddenly, at 10 a.m., an unexpected visit occurred, as it was outside the permitted visiting hours. The matter was urgent. His mother and sister came to inform him about what had happened to Crystal. Emotions ran high. If he had not been incarcerated, he would have torn Tommy apart with his own hands. Naturally, this didn't change much. Mark couldn't change anything, not even be present in court to support his daughter. But at that moment, something shifted in him. He rethought his life, which had brought his daughter to that house on that fateful night. If it weren't for his problems, no one would have attacked Crystal. Meanwhile, there was one main issue to be resolved, determining what punishment the serial killer would receive for the murder of Katie and the attempted murder of Crystal. Pam had wanted the death penalty for the attacker from the very beginning. Crystal initially supported this decision, but gradually she concluded that she did not want to become like that creature who thirsted for blood. She advocated for a life sentence instead. However, compared to crimes, the prosecutor's office demanded the death penalty. The jury supported this initiative. In the end, Tommy was sentenced to death. The court believed that this would allow him to atone not only for Katie and Crystal but for all of his other victims. He eluded authorities for 20 years and was finally stopped thanks to a brave schoolgirl. Tommy Lynn Sells was born in Oakland, California, on June 28, 1964, one of 5 children of a single mother. He hardly knew his father. Tommy's sister fell ill and died when she was only 1.5 years old. After that, he was sent to live with his aunt, where he behaved poorly. He was returned to his mother, who did not want him. By the age of 7, Tommy had begun to drink alcohol and soon became the victim of abuse by an adult man. From the age of 10, he became addicted to banned substance and troubled his grandmother. All family members began to fear him, eventually kicked him out of the house. From the age of 14, Tommy began to wander. When he was 17, he found his mother and began to molest her in the shower. He was placed in a psychiatric clinic, where he was diagnosed with several disorders, including bipolar disorder. However, the treatment did not help. His condition worsened due to alcohol and substance abuse. According to Tommy, he committed his first murder at 15, on July 5, 1979, in Port Gibson, Mississippi, when he shot and killed 39-year-old John Kay during a home invasion. Witnesses described a suspect who resembled Tommy. The violence escalated from there. The next attack occurred on April 27, 1982, in St. Louis, Missouri, when 35-year-old Joanne Tate, 35, was abused and murdered in her home. Notably, another man had already been convicted and was serving time for this crime, but he was later exonerated. Tommy committed several murders of single mothers with children, breaking into their homes at night, kidnapping the children from their homes, abusing, and killing them in various ways. The style of each crime was different, so detectives did not see a connection between the attacks. The criminal did not spare anyone, even small children. Sometimes he would meet a future victim, gain her trust, enter her house, then kill her and her children. Tommy's most horrific murder was the attack on the Dardine family, where he killed 4 people at once. On November 17, 1987, while hitchhiking, he was picked up by 29-year-old Keith Dardine, who kindly brought him home for dinner. But instead of gratitude, Tommy shot Keith and then beat his 3-year-old son to death. He then proceeded to assault the pregnant wife of the homeowner, who gave birth to a baby girl during the attack. He killed both the wife and the newborn. Tommy's last known crime was the attack on Kathy and Crystal. For some of the 22 established murders, he received life sentences in various states. For others, he was never convicted, believing that the death penalty would suffice. Despite the fact that Crystal had defeated a serial killer, she had mixed feelings. She did not feel joy at the upcoming execution of Tommy, as she had never been the kind of person who indulged in such things, no matter who the perpetrator was. However, she did not challenge the verdict. Now, Crystal faced a much harder and longer struggle. Her parents were confident that she would cope with the consequences of the attack. Her mother and sisters rallied around her, even sleeping together in the same bed to provide support. Unfortunately, this did not always allow Crystal to rest fully. At times, she could spend an entire night without blinking, staring at the closed window of her room. By her own admission, during such moments, she thought about her escape routes in case of an attack. If the criminal entered through that window, she knew to run out through the other one. And if he entered through the door, she also knew how to hide quickly. In addition, it was important for Crystal to know that her loved ones were nearby. The girl felt reassured simply by the fact that her mother and sisters were alive and breathing. She could sense it. Gradually, Crystal began to regain her sense of self. Her father, Mark, spent 3 years behind bars. When he was released, he immediately sought to improve his relationship with his daughter, who had miraculously survived the attack of a serial killer. He understood that she needed support and help. She saw her father on the right path, even attending her graduation. However, Crystal felt that the relationship with her father was still a struggle. Their relationship continued to improve gradually, and both looked at it positively. Crystal was in a mentally difficult situation. It was not easy for her to feel joy despite an unconditional victory while her friend had died. Gradually, she returned to her usual life and became like a mother to the younger members of the family. Later, she spoke repeatedly with journalists, sharing that she cannot psychologically develop trust in people. Because of this, she has difficulties with relationships, although she genuinely wants to build a family. Nevertheless, Crystal still believes in the best. She even saw her father cope, quit crime and addiction, gradually make up for lost time. She is now 35 years old. Crystal is close to her family and constantly remembers her friend who was killed before her eyes. The events of that terrible night remain etched in her memory. Little is known about her personal life at the moment. On January 3, 2014, a judge set Tommy's execution date. The death sentence by lethal injection was carried out on April 3, 2014, at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Crystal and members of the Harris family were present at the execution. On January 17, 1999, a man called 911 to report that he had found a woman unresponsive in her home. He was a friend of the victim, Miriam Illes, and had gone to check on her because she hadn't been answering his calls. When he arrived at her house, he discovered that it was locked, and none of the doors would open. Looking through a window, he saw Miriam lying on the kitchen floor, clearly deceased. When the police arrived and entered the house, they found that she had been attacked in the back, specifically targeting her heart area. Investigators spoke with the man who called 911, who provided details about Miriam. She was a homemaker and had previously worked in the medical field. Miriam was active in her local community, and her friends were worried about her that day because she hadn't attended Sunday school. She was well-liked and devoted mother to a young boy, Richie. Everyone who knew her believed she had no enemies, which made her death in her locked kitchen even more perplexing. Determining Miriam's time of death was crucial, but without witnesses, the exact timing was uncertain. Police officers meticulously searched the crime scene for evidence, noting that the house appeared undisturbed and showed no signs of forced entry. All external doors to the house and garage were locked when Miriam's body was found. A telephone receiver lay near her hand, suggesting that she may have been on the phone when she was attacked, potentially catching her off guard and leaving her unaware of her attacker. Investigators also requested a report from the phone company to find out about Miriam's recent calls. While examining the crime scene to determine how the attacker entered and exited the house, detectives made a significant discovery. They found a bullet hole in a double-glazed window located just above the kitchen sink. This indicated that the person who shot Miriam was positioned outside. It appeared that Miriam had been standing, leaning against the sink, talking on the phone when she was shot. This single bullet became the key piece of evidence. Tracing the bullet's path, investigators followed it to a creek bed behind Miriam's house. As the investigation progressed, the forensics team found footprints left by size 14 Reebok basketball shoes. The placement of the tracks suggested that someone had taken a shooting stance next to a tree located right behind the kitchen window. The detectives also found a cigarette butt at the shooting site. Further searching revealed a homemade silencer, leading investigators to conclude that the crime was premeditated. The attacker had been hiding behind the tree, waiting for the right moment, smoking a cigarette, and seemed to act with intent. However, the motive behind the crime remained unclear. It did not appear that Miriam was involved in any illegal activities or taking risks that would endanger her. Investigators aimed to gather more information from Miriam's husband, Richard Illes, who arrived at the crime scene while they were there. Richard was a well-known cardiothoracic surgeon at Williamsport Hospital and had saved many lives. He met Miriam in the early 90s while serving as a resident at St. Louis Medical Center, where she worked as a surgical assistant. After marrying, they had a son named Richie and moved to Williamsport, where they both worked together. Miriam was active in her community, engaging in volunteer work at the symphony and church. Her vibrant personality made her well-liked among friends. Despite their wealth and status, Miriam's friends described her as down-to-earth, noting that they were among the richest people in Williamsport. Then she decided to become a stay-at-home mom, quitting her job when Richie was 2 years old and never returning to work. When Miriam was murdered in her own home, Richard became a primary focus for investigators. He told them that the last time he saw Miriam was 2 days earlier, on Friday, January 15, 1999, around 5 p.m., when he visited her before planning to travel to Chester County, Pennsylvania, to visit family. Detectives soon learned that Miriam and Richard had recently separated after 8 years of marriage, with Miriam moving out of their family home to the house where she was later found dead. She had primary custody of their son, Richie, while Richard visited the boy every weekend. Their ongoing divorce raised potential motives, prompting investigators to closely examine their relationship. Richard's behavior struck detectives as unusual. The first question he asked upon learning of Miriam's death was about the evidence that had been found, which seemed odd for someone who had just learned that his wife of 8 years and the mother of his child was dead. Additionally, Richard made an intriguing confession. He was familiar with firearms, having participated in hunting and owned guns, a common practice in the area. There was nothing particularly unusual about this admission. Investigators examined Richard's firearms to check for any connections to the crime scene. They determined that the bullet that killed Miriam was a .22 caliber, indicating the type of weapon they needed to find. Richard had several .22 caliber rifles, which the police confiscated for analysis. He became the primary suspect due to having a motive, access to weapons, and the skills necessary to commit the crime. The intense emotions in romantic relationships can shift from love to hate, which could have played a role in Miriam's death. While the weapon was being analyzed in the forensic lab, investigators looked further into Richard's personal life. As a cardiothoracic surgeon, he had a high income, but he was also paying a significant amount in child support, around $112,000 a month. This financial burden could have motivated him to want his wife dead. Investigators sought to clarify Richard's whereabouts at the time Miriam was attacked. Although Richard was supposed to pick up his son Richie that Friday evening, he opted to spend the weekend with his sister, who lived 2.5 hours away in Honeybrook, Pennsylvania. He had a witness, Nancy Mitch, who could confirm the start of his trip. Nancy informed the investigators that she was with Miriam when Miriam handed over her son, Richie, to Richard. He picked up Richie around 5 p.m., and after Nancy left, Miriam seemed to be fine. The last confirmed sighting of Miriam was around 6 p.m. on Friday, January 15th. The police established that Richard took Richie from Miriam's home and left while Miriam stayed behind, and everything seemed normal. Richard told investigators that he made a quick stop before going to his sister's house. He first stopped at his own home around 9:30 p.m. and then traveled toward southeastern Pennsylvania. He stated that they reached Lewisburg and stopped at a fast food restaurant around 10 p.m. due to bad weather that evening. He called his sister at 11:24 p.m. to inform her that they would spend the night near Harrisburg. Nancy confirmed part of Richard's alibi, prompting detectives to verify the rest of his statements. They checked Richard's cell phone records, which confirmed his call to his sister. He also had a hotel receipt from the Harrisburg area, where he checked in at 12:57 a.m. This corroborated Richard's account, indicating that he could not have been at the crime scene when Miriam was attacked. An examination of Richard's rifles showed that none matched the murder weapon, and the silencer found at the crime scene did not fit any of his rifles either. Furthermore, DNA samples from the silencer and a cigarette but did not match Richard's DNA. As the investigation progressed, police discovered that Richard had been having an affair with Catherine Sawyer, a colleague at Williamsport Hospital, which contributed to his separation from Miriam. His relationship with Miriam had begun similarly. He worked with her, they formed a bond, and eventually got married. A similar pattern occurred with Catherine. She worked with Richard, leading to their affair. This information led investigators to consider a possible love triangle. Catherine might have had a motive to kill Miriam in order to eliminate any chance of Richard reconciling with his wife. Jealousy can often drive people to commit terrible acts, but there were additional factors at play. In the event of a divorce, Richard and Miriam would need to divide their assets and finances. Furthermore, if they divorce, Richie is likely to stay with Miriam, which would require Richard to pay child support. Therefore, Miriam's death could be advantageous for both Richard and Catherine. Detectives aimed to determine Catherine's whereabouts at the time of Miriam's death. If Richard had left town to visit family, it would have given Catherine the opportunity to commit the murder. However, investigators confirmed that Catherine was out of town visiting relatives and could not have been involved in the crime. This left the police without any other suspects, as both Richard and Catherine had alibis. Then, an unexpected development emerged when a person claiming to be the murderer contacted the detectives by sending letters to the police station. The first anonymous letter stated that the writer was responsible for Miriam's murder. Detectives were perplexed, as this was an unusual occurrence. Initially, they suspected it might be a prank, possibly from teenagers or someone loosely connected to the case. The writer referred to himself as a soldier of God and a soldier of death, claiming that Miriam was a bad and immoral person. The letter was both confusing and unsettling. Despite attempts to make contact, the writer took great care to hide his identity. The letters were examined for fingerprints, but none were found. They were handwritten in block letters with a pencil, making it difficult for police to analyze the handwriting. While investigators were trying to make sense of the first letter, a second letter arrived, written in a different style and showing signs of arrogance and intellectual superiority. This new letter pointed to a potential suspect, as the author mentioned having multiple academic degrees, suggesting that the crime could have been committed by someone connected to Richard's professional circle. Investigators identified Dr. Ench Zama, Richard's close friend, as the most likely suspect. Zama was described as a tall man, likely with large feet, possibly in size 14. He became a key focus for investigators regarding the anonymous letters. During questioning, he examined both letters and suggested that someone might be trying to frame him. He denied any involvement in Miriam's death and claimed he was with friends at the time of the crime. The investigators verified his alibi and confirmed that he could not have attacked Miriam. The anonymous letters were also analyzed for DNA, revealing a black hair on the sealed flap of one envelope. The DNA did not match Zama or any other samples from the crime scene. This led investigators to suspect that someone was deliberately trying to mislead them. It seemed the letter writer had taken great care to hide their identity, but did they accidentally leave behind a hair? Investigators theorized that the hair was intentionally included to confuse them, as it belonged to someone unrelated to the case. They began to suspect that false evidence had been planted. The silencer with DNA, the cigarette butt, and the letters all suggested a deliberate effort to mislead the investigation. Investigators ended up with 4 DNA samples, each belonging to different individuals. The perpetrator had cleverly planted false evidence, hoping to mislead the police and hinder the investigation. However, investigators received the crucial information they had been waiting for since the first day of the investigation, when Miriam's body was discovered. Near her body, they found a phone receiver. Upon reviewing the phone records, they learned that Miriam had been on a call with a friend throughout the evening. When detectives met with this friend, she recounted that during their conversation, she heard glass breaking and then heard Miriam exclaim, "Oh my God." After that, she heard nothing more and hung up. When she called back, she received a busy signal, leading her to assume that the call had been disconnected and that Miriam was talking to someone else. This piece of information provided detectives with the key detail they had been missing. The call ended at 10:37 p.m., which corresponded exactly with the time of Miriam's death. This was significant for the investigation. With the established time of death, detectives revisited the alibis of all potential suspects. Richard's alibi appeared less credible. Initially, he claimed to have been in the Williamsport area and said he was heading south on Highway 15 by 10 p.m. He mentioned stopping for a meal at a restaurant, and if he had truly been at the restaurant at that time, he would not have been able to commit the crime. However, investigators could not verify his presence there at that time, which weakened his alibi. Then, at 11:24 p.m., Richard called his sister to inform her that he and Richie would need to stay at a hotel. This call became crucial for the investigation. Detectives began to trace Richard's cell phone location at the time of the call, which altered the direction of the investigation. The cell phone company provided coverage maps, allowing police to estimate where Richard made the call. They found that Richard had enough time to commit the crime and reach the hotel, where he checked in at 12:57 a.m. Detectives retraced the route from Miriam's home to the hotel, confirming that Richard could have committed the crime by 10:37 p.m. and still arrived in Harrisburg on time. The distance between the crime scene and the hotel was approximately 100 miles, and despite poor weather conditions, investigators made the trip within the required time frame. Now, Richard was the only suspect without an alibi. While this did not make him guilty, it did raise suspicions. The police needed concrete evidence to link him to the crime. They caught a break when 2 men walking in the woods found a modified rifle. Finding it unusual, they called the police. The rifle had a shortened barrel, a stock, and an optical sight, but the bolt was missing, and its serial numbers had been erased. It was identified as a rifle that matched the bullet that killed Miriam, and it was found near the road Richard drove on the night of the murder. Experts examined the suppressor found at the crime scene to see if it fit the rifle. They discovered that a screw had been added to the barrel, allowing the suppressor to attach perfectly. The challenge now was to link this weapon to Richard. The rifle was a Savage .23D Hornet, and police learned that Richard had inherited weapons from his father, with only his Aunt Jean being aware of this. A detective spoke with Richard's aunt, Jean, who showed him a photo album. In a black and white photo, she revealed her brother, aka Richard's father, posing with a Savage .23D rifle. Too many coincidences pointed to Richard as a possible perpetrator. He had inherited the rifle along with other guns, but the Savage rifle was missing from his collection. Investigators needed more evidence for a conviction. They found several DNA samples at the scene that did not match Richard's. When the snow melted, they returned to the area where the rifle was found and conducted a detailed search. They discovered a pair of athletic shoes that matched the size and tread pattern of the footprints at the crime scene, indicating that the prints could have been left by the same shoes. The coincidence of the sneakers and rifle found in the woods being linked to the crime was highly unlikely. Experts needed to establish that the shoes belonged to Richard, but the sneakers were size 14, whereas Richard wore size 10. It was possible that he deliberately wore shoes that were not his size to confuse the police. The shoes were sent for forensic analysis. A hair was found on one of the sneakers, and DNA testing revealed that it did not match Richard's. This was another setback for the investigators, but they remained determined. They theorized that Richard had given his son, Richie, sleeping pills to keep him asleep in the car. A further hair test was conducted, this time looking for a match to Richie's DNA instead of Richard's. They found a match based on mitochondrial DNA. Richard had tried to use false DNA to mislead the police, but in the end, his son's DNA linked him to the murder. Investigators believe that Richie's hair accidentally made its way into the sneaker, possibly transferred from another surface when Richard changed shoes. In December 2002, 3 years after Miriam's death, Richard was unexpectedly arrested. He had been clever in planning the crime. He created an alibi, constructed a silencer, and intentionally wore the wrong shoe size. However, he left DNA evidence on the silencer and a cigarette butt. To mislead the investigation, he even mailed a hair to the police, but all the DNA samples turned out to belong to other individuals. Richard destroyed the serial numbers on the rifle to hide his tracks, but it appeared he rushed his alibi since he didn't properly conceal the rifle and boots. Richard had meticulously prepared for this crime, modifying the rifle and making a suppressor, which required considerable time and effort. He chose a weekend for the crime when his son, Richie, was staying with him to prevent his son from witnessing any violence. The plan began on Friday around 5 p.m. when he picked up Richie from Miriam's home. He returned a few hours later, parking approximately half a mile away from her house, and gave his son a sleeping pill to ensure he would sleep through the events that were about to unfold. Richard then walked to a spot by a tree along the creek bed, waiting for the right moment when Miriam was near the kitchen window. He couldn't shoot from any other angle, so he patiently waited for hours. At 10:37 p.m., while she was on the phone with a friend, he took his shot. He left behind evidence, a cigarette butt, intentionally placed where it could be discovered. He then fled the scene, leaving size 14 shoe prints, returned to his car, and drove south. He found a secluded area to dispose of his evidence, getting rid of the rifle and sneakers before heading back. At 11:24 p.m., he called his sister, hoping the phone records would support his alibi. However, they actually indicated that he had sufficient time to commit the murder. Though Richard did not admit to the crime, the jury reached a different conclusion and convicted him. In 2004, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Miriam's family issued a statement describing the situation as tragic, expressing that they felt there were no winners, but they were relieved to finally have closure and justice. Richard attempted to appeal the court's decision, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Perry March was born in 1961 to Arthur March and Sephora. He and his wife, Janet, were complete opposites of each other. He is ordinary, but his wife was a very bright, beautiful woman, dreamy and talented. Janet grew up in a wealthy family, as the daughter of a well-known lawyer from Nashville. Janet and Perry met as students at the University of Michigan in the early 1980s and quickly became inseparable. When Perry graduated and moved to Chicago to work as a financial broker, Janet followed him without hesitation. However, she soon began to miss her home and family. To support Perry's education, her father agreed to pay for his expensive tuition at the prestigious Vanderbilt Law School. As a result, Janet and Perry returned to Nashville, and since Perry was hesitant, it was Janet who proposed to him in Percy Warner Park. They got married in 1987 and moved into a house in a well-known area of the city, which was rented and paid for by Janet's father. The following year, Perry graduated and chose to work for a local law firm in Nashville instead of accepting offers from large firms in New York. In 1990, Janet gave birth to a son named Samson, affectionately called Sammy. On the surface, this family seemed to have everything: a mother, a father, and a son. Unfortunately, this outward appearance of happiness was deceptive. In 1991, a scandal emerged at the law firm where Perry worked after a young female specialist received an inappropriate proposal from a colleague. A stranger sent her a letter expressing his attraction to her and his desire for an intimate relationship. Feeling embarrassed, the young woman reported the incident to her boss. After this, 2 more letters arrived, urging her to respond to the proposal by leaving a message in the firm's library. In response, the firm took measures to identify the sender of these inappropriate letters. They installed a CCTV camera in the library where she was supposed to leave her reply. When the man came to collect the letter, the firm's lawyers were shocked to discover that he was Perry March, the husband of Janet. Faced with evidence from the video, Perry refused to confess. The law firm gave him an ultimatum: resign or be fired. He chose to resign. This uncomfortable situation led to legal consequences, as the female employee who received the unwanted proposal sued Perry for financial compensation. He was ordered to pay her. To avoid a harassment claim, she requested $25,000, half of which Perry was to pay in monthly installments, while the remaining $12,500 was to be paid in a lump sum. This arrangement was made to keep his wife, Janet, from discovering the scandal. In 1994, Janet and Perry welcomed their second child, a lovely daughter named Sephora. As their family grew, they decided to build a larger home and purchased nearly 2 acres in the affluent suburb of Forest Hill. Over the next year, they worked on constructing their dream house, a $650,000 mansion designed in the French country style. Janet was very enthusiastic about the project and closely oversaw every stage of the construction. However, her demands were sometimes unreasonable, leading Perry to step in and help mediate between her and the construction team. Although the new house brought excitement, Janet and Perry's marriage was facing difficulties. Their relationship had been strained for several months, and they frequently attended therapy, both together and individually. At home, they rarely communicated. Perry was often away for at least 3 days a week, and their arguments escalated whenever he returned. A family therapist suggested they take a break from each other, but Janet was adamant about getting a divorce. In August 1996, a significant incident occurred that changed the course of Janet and Perry's relationship forever. Perry needed to pay the final installment to a woman at a law firm, but, due to financial issues, he sent her a letter requesting to postpone the payment until October. Unfortunately, Janet read the letter, which led to a heated argument between them. In the aftermath, Janet contacted her mother to arrange a meeting with a divorce lawyer. On August 15, 1996, Janet was scheduled to meet with the lawyer but never arrived at the office because she mysteriously disappeared that night. Perry claimed that Janet left voluntarily after their argument. He told the police that she expressed a desire to get some space to think but did not specify where she was going. He said that at around 8:30 p.m., Janet packed a suitcase, took her passport and $1,500 in cash, and left in her car. He also mentioned that she left him a list of tasks to complete before her return. After she left, he informed friends and family of her departure as he normally would. The next morning, Deneen Beard, the maid, came to clean the house and was surprised to find everything in order. However, Perry asked her to focus on her work and not to go into the children's room. Then a nanny named Ella Goldschmidt, who had previously arranged with Janet that her son would play with Sammy, arrived. After Deneen left, Ella noticed Sammy jumping on an oriental rug that was rolled up on the floor next to the playroom. When she returned around 2 p.m. to pick up her son, the rug was no longer there. Initially, Janet's family believed Perry's explanation. Janet's father went to Nashville International Airport to check if Janet had left her car there. Janet's mother, Carolyn, became increasingly worried, as her daughter would not just vanish without a word and would never abandon her children. Although Carolyn wanted to contact the police, Perry convinced her to wait 12 days, claiming that Janet had said she would return by then. That evening, Perry called his father, Arthur, a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel living in Jalisco, Mexico. Arthur readily agreed to travel to Nashville to support his son during this challenging time. In the meantime, Janet's family's concerns continued to escalate. With August 25th being Sammy's 6th birthday, fears grew that something had happened to Janet. She would definitely not miss such an important occasion. While Perry and Janet's parents told the party guests she had traveled to California to visit her brother and was postponing her return due to an ear infection, her sudden disappearance raised alarm among her loved ones. Days passed without any news from Janet, and the anxious waiting could not go on much longer. On August 29th, Janet's parents reported her missing to the police. Detective David Miller, a skilled investigator with extensive experience, was assigned to the case. He initiated the investigation by reaching out to hospitals and reviewing Janet's bank and credit card accounts, which had not been used since her disappearance, raising concerns about her well-being. On September 7th, authorities located Janet's car in a parking lot at an apartment complex about 5 miles from her home. The car appeared to have been parked there for several weeks. Inside, police discovered Janet's bag, which contained her documents, passport, credit cards, and $11 in cash. They also found a suitcase filled with clothes, notably absent of a bra, toothpaste, a comb, or underwear, which seemed unusual. Additional evidence included a pair of white sandals in the glove compartment and unusual, dirty bicycle tire tracks near the car. Investigators needed to analyze this evidence carefully. On September 10, 1996, Perry was questioned by investigators and consented to a search of his home. The police conducted the search over the weekend of September 14th to 15th while Perry was away in Chicago with his children. The house showed no signs of domestic violence or anything noteworthy. A few days later, the owner of a tire store contacted law enforcement to inform them that Perry had visited the store on August 21st, a week after Janet went missing. Perry inquired about purchasing a new set of tires, despite the good condition of those already on his car. When asked why he wanted a different brand, his response raised further suspicions. On September 18th, Perry decided to move to Chicago with his children. Before leaving, he had a concerning conversation with Janet's longtime friend, Diane Sachs, which she later reported to the police. Perry asked Diane if she thought he could kill his wife. Although she hesitated to answer, he proceeded to ask the disturbing question of what she would think if he had loaded Janet's body into his car and taken it to a remote location for disposal. This raised serious suspicions about him. As a result, the police launched a comprehensive search for Janet, involving divers, 2 helicopters with thermal scanners, specially trained dogs, police officers, and volunteers. Meanwhile, Perry hired a lawyer, who informed the police that Perry would not cooperate with the investigation. In November, as Janet's parents held a day of mourning for her, Perry chose not to attend, further increasing the police's suspicions about him. Over time, a theory about Janet's disappearance began to develop. It was suggested that Perry and Janet had a heated argument the night she disappeared. During this argument, Janet may have said something that provoked Perry, leading him to strike her hard. Given that Perry held a black belt in martial arts, a single blow could have killed her, or he might have strangled her. Whether intentional or not, when he found Janet dead at his feet, he was faced with a dire decision. Investigators believe that Perry hid Janet's body either in the basement, in the woods, or near their home. Furthermore, Ella had mentioned that there was a rolled-up rug that she had noticed in Perry's house that morning. Janet's body may have been inside that carpet, and tragically, little Sammy may have unknowingly played around his mother's body. Afterward, Perry moved her body to his Jeep and drove to a location where he buried it. He then drove Janet's car to where it was later discovered, taking her mountain bike with him so he could ride it back home. However, these are merely speculations, and the police were tasked with uncovering evidence of the murder, marking a new phase in the investigation. Janet's father, a prominent lawyer, was determined to uncover the truth about his daughter's disappearance. Meanwhile, Perry applied to become the manager of Janet's estate, but her parents opposed this and filed their own petition. Perry refused to consent. Ultimately, the court designated a guardian to oversee Janet's property and ordered Perry to return some items he had taken. He only returned them after being urged to do so. This was just the beginning of a legal dispute between Perry and Janet's parents. The battle continued until late 1999 when the court granted Janet's parents the right to visit their grandchildren. They traveled to Perry's new home in Illinois, eager to see the children, but were shocked to discover that he had moved to Mexico to be with his father. Moreover, just weeks after relocating, Perry married a local woman named Carmen Rojas. 3 years had passed since Janet went missing, and she still had not been officially declared dead. This prompted her parents to file a lawsuit against Perry for the manslaughter of their daughter. When Perry did not appear in court to contest the charges against him, the judge ordered him to pay $113.5 million in compensation to Janet's parents in May 2000. Janet's parents traveled back to Mexico to confront Perry and requested to meet his children. He firmly refused their request, prompting them to return to Nashville. A month later, they returned to Mexico with a court order and assistance from local police, who arrested Perry for violating his visa. Although the charges were eventually dropped, by the time Perry got back home, his children were missing. Taking advantage of Perry's absence, Janet's parents took the children to the U.S. and sought permanent custody once they were home. This led to a direct confrontation and sparked another legal battle for custody. Ultimately, Perry regained custody, and Janet's parents were reprimanded for unlawfully taking the children. Later, the Tennessee Court of Appeals overturned Perry's manslaughter conviction. At this point, Perry believed he could lead a stable life in Mexico with his new wife and children, feeling confident that nothing would disrupt his plans. However, unexpected developments were on the horizon, as the local police department, along with 2 investigators, continued to actively investigate Janet's case. In the latter half of 2004, the prosecutor's office introduced new evidence that led to a retrial, during which 59 witnesses were heard. This resulted in charges against Perry for second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and abuse of a corpse. In October 2005, an arrest warrant and a request for extradition to the United States were issued for Perry. While being transported, Perry was accompanied by Pat Postiglione, one of the detectives involved in the investigation. During the journey, Perry was quite talkative and asked the detective whether he could face murder charges if an accident occurred. He also told Pat that he would be willing to confess everything if he could receive a sentence of no more than 7 years. The detective stated that he would pass this information on to the district attorney. Janet's parents were determined not to allow Perry to enjoy a new life after spending a short time in prison. They submitted a new petition for custody of the children, which the judge approved. Facing difficulties in the legal system, Perry sought another solution. He attempted to persuade his cellmate, Russell Ferris, to kill Janet's parents. Russell became interested in the plan and learned that Perry's father, Arthur, would act as the intermediary. After 2 months of discussions among the three, Russell's lawyer notified the police about Perry's offer to kill Janet's parents. From that point on, Perry's situation became increasingly complicated. Initially, the evidence against Perry for murder was weak and mostly circumstantial. His lawyer argued that there was no solid proof that Perry had committed the crime. If he had been found not guilty, he could not be tried again for the same offense. However, the situation changed dramatically with the discovery of a murder-for-hire plot involving Janet's parents. Now, the police had recorded conversations revealing details of the planned murder, including statements made by both Perry and his father, Arthur. When Arthur listened to the recordings, he realized his errors and agreed to testify against his son in exchange for a more lenient sentence. The disturbing truth emerged. Arthur, Perry's father, revealed that his son had confessed to him about killing Janet. A few weeks after the murder, Perry sought his father's help because he was anxious about the body being discovered. He asked Arthur to help hide it. One night, they drove to a location where, according to Arthur, the body was already decomposing and stored in a bag. Arthur recounted loading the remains into Perry's Jeep. They then traveled north to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where they stayed at a motel. Under the cover of darkness, Arthur attempted to dispose of the body. He looked for a body of water deep enough to conceal the remains but was unable to find one before sunrise. Eventually, he located a suitable spot. Arthur later attempted to guide investigators to the location where he had hidden the body, but he couldn't specify the exact spot. However, both the police and the jury believed his account of the incident. According to Arthur, after Perry killed Janet, her body remained in their home for some time, wrapped in a rug. Unfortunately for Arthur, his confession did not yield the leniency he had hoped for, and he died just months later while incarcerated. Perry faced a much harsher fate. He was convicted of second-degree murder, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, theft, and conspiracy to commit murder, resulting in a 56-year prison sentence. He is currently incarcerated at the Morgan County Correctional Complex, where he assists fellow inmates with their legal appeals in the prison law library. He will be eligible for parole in 2038. Tragically, Janet's remains have never been found,